Call this meeting to order. The time is 9:00 a.m. Today is March 22nd, 2023. This is the first day of a two-day meeting of the Physical Therapy Board of California. Today we are meeting in the hearing room at the University of the Pacific, 751 Brookside Road, Stockton, California, 95211, in room PHS 110 and 111. We are also meeting virtually via a WebEx component. No? It's not webcast. Okay, thank you. This is an official business meeting of the Physical Therapy Board. The board's role remains to maintain consumer protection and consult with local and state entities on the laws and regulations pertaining to the physical therapy industry. We will take public comment on specific agenda items, and there will also be an agenda item for comments for items not on the agenda. Public comments must be specific to the agenda item that is being discussed. If you make a comment during a specific agenda item that is not related to that topic, you will be directed to hold your comments until we reach the appropriate agenda item. All comments that do not directly relate to an item on the agenda should be held until the agenda item for items not on the agenda. The board follows the Open Meeting Act, so while we accept and appreciate the public's comments, we cannot respond to those comments. This meeting is being recorded, and the minutes of the meeting will be prepared. Can we please have roll call? Thank you.
Tanya McMillian.
Present.
Dale Armstrong. Present. Karen Brandon.
Present.
Daniel Drummer.
Present.
Katarina Ellaby.
Present.
Jonathan Irvin. Jonathan Irvin is absent. Alicia Benet-Men.
Here.
All members are present with the exception of Jonathan Irvin, and the board has a quorum.
May I please ask Karen Brandon to read the board's mission statement?
Sure. The mission of the PT Board of California is to advance and protect the interests of the people of California by the effective administration of the Physical Therapy Practice Act.
Thank you, Member Brandon. We now will move on to our number 4, our special order of business, and I will be handing it over to our administrative law judge.
All right, thank you, President McMillian. My name is Sean Gavin. I'm the administrative law judge who will be presiding over this case. Looks like we have the Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Gatchett. Good morning. Do we have petitioner? Good morning, sir. You can go ahead and have a seat there. Can you tell me how to pronounce your last name? Gaddis. Gaddis? All right, thank you very much. While you get situated, let me just explain. We're not on the record yet, but once we go on the record, the hearing will proceed as follows. First, I'll give Mr. Gatchett a chance to briefly summarize the license and disciplinary history. That's just to ensure that the board has adequate information to make a decision in this case. Mr. Gatchett, is it 4 separate exhibits or 1 exhibit?
So what I've done with the binder, Your Honor, is I've placed it, it's actually 7 exhibits.
Okay.
So we have some more exhibits that you received than online.
Okay.
We have a probation file, an access file. The board members have copies of that electronically.
Okay.
What I've done though is I've broken those exhibits into different sections by the table of contents, so they're just ease of access. So
Okay.
Flipping, and then they've been bait stamped and redacted.
Okay.
So I was thinking, Your Honor, we just do a brief introduction from myself, and then I'll just walk through the documents and turn it over to petitioner. I know he has one witness that he'd like to call today in behalf of his petition, and then I'm going to call the probation monitor. So.
Sure. All right. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Gaddis, first, the videographer has just shown you how to turn your microphone on. Just make sure that when you talk, it's on so that the recording clearly captures your voice. As I said, Mr. Gatchett will first walk us through the license and disciplinary history. He'll then take us through the 7 exhibits. You'll have a right to object to the admissibility of those exhibits if you'd like. If you want to object, you simply just say, I object when I ask. I'll then find out information about why you object. and then we'll go from there. After Mr. Gadget has presented the petition and the supporting documents, we'll then turn it over to you. Mr. Gadget does have one witness to call, but after that, we'll then turn it over to you. You can present additional evidence in the form of your own testimony. You can call additional witnesses. I understand you have one. And you can present additional documents. Do you have any additional documents besides what's in the binder?
I do. I have a certificate of completion of a drug and alcohol course that was done January of this year.
Okay, and that's not already in the petition binder, is that right?
Correct.
Do you have copies for Mr. Gadget and for all the board members?
I do.
Okay. Can you pass those out now?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think I'll be one short with Your Honor having a copy there.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. And as I said, we're just distributing them now. We're not on the record yet. This isn't in evidence yet. Just want to make sure everyone has a copy.
Sure.
So once we go on the record, we don't have to take time. So as I was saying, you can testify on your own behalf. You can call additional witnesses. You can present your documents. After you've testified, the board members, starting with the farthest on my left, will have a chance to ask you any questions that you might have. Mr. Gadget may have some questions for you as well. After that, after all the evidence is presented, you will be entitled to make a closing statement if you'd like. Closing statements are just a brief summary of what you think the evidence showed and a suggestion of what outcome should happen as a result. Closing statements are optional. You can make one or not. It's really up to you. You won't get the decision today. After your hearing is over, the board will meet in closed session to discuss what to do with your petition, to grant it or not, and you'll get that decision within 30 days typically. Any questions about that hearing procedure?
No, sir.
All right. Mr. Gadget, is there anything to take up before we go on the record?
No, I'll just plan on introducing his certificate as Exhibit 8, so I just marked it on the table of contents, so we'll just add it to the back end. I don't think that
Okay.
I have an objection.
That'll be just fine. All right. Anything else, Mr. Gadget, before we go on the record? All right. Madam Court Reporter, are you ready to go on the record? Yes. All right. We are on the record in the matter of the petition for reduction of penalty brought by George Gasson Gaddis, PT. This matter is being heard before the Physical Therapy Board of California. My name is Sean Gavin. I'm the Administrative Law Judge from the Office of Administrative Hearings presiding over this matter. The board case number is 720-2018-001-832, and the OAH case number is 2023-020-548. Can I take the appearances of the parties, starting with counsel?
Good morning, Your Honor. John Gatchett, appearing on behalf of the Attorney General's office in this matter.
Thank you. And petitioner?
My name's George Gaddis, PT, and I'm here representing myself.
All right, here today without the assistance of counsel.
Correct.
All right, thank you very much. For the board's meeting, we established a quorum, but for the purposes of your record, I need to just do a brief roll call. So starting with the member furthest to my left, just say your name, please.
Katarina Ellaby.
Daniel Drummer.
Dale Armstrong.
Tanya McMillan.
Alicia Rabina Amon.
Karen Brandon.
All right, thank you very much. These members constitute a quorum. Before we went on the record, I briefly explained the hearing procedures. I'll just summarize that explanation now so your record is complete. In a moment, I'll give Mr. Gatchett a chance to present the license and disciplinary history. He'll also present what's now a total of 8 exhibits. You'll have a right to object to those exhibits if you'd like. If you'd like to object, simply say, "I object," and I'll find out some more information and rule on that objection. Mr. Gatchett, I understand, also has one witness. After Mr. Gatchett presents that evidence, you'll have a chance, Mr. Gaddis, to present any additional evidence you'd like. You can testify on your own behalf. You can also call additional witnesses, and I understand you have one document that's been pre-marked as Exhibit 8, and you can introduce that as well. After you've testified, the board members, starting with the member furthest to my left, will have a chance to ask you some questions, and Mr. Gatchett will have a chance to ask you some questions as well. Once you've concluded with all the evidence, you'll then have a chance to make a brief closing remark if you'd like. Closing remarks are just a brief summary of what you think the evidence showed and a suggestion of what outcome should happen. Any questions about any of that?
No, Your Honor.
All right, very good. Mr. Gatchett, anything to take up before I turn it over to you?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, then you can proceed as you see fit.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, what we're here today is for a petition for early termination of probation. And so the history of this case, petitioner in July of 2018 applied for licensure with the board, and the board denied his request in October of 2018. A statement of issues was filed following that denial, and we settled that statement of issues with a stipulation. And the board adopted the stipulation, and on May 24th, 2019, placed his license on 5 years probation and granted him a license.
Mr. Gatchett, just go 10% slower for the court reporter.
Sure.
Thanks.
And so the terms of the probation included all the substance abuse licensing terms, including Maximus, which includes alcohol testing, rehab programs, and going to AA. The reason for the denial was in October 2014, driving under the influence conviction with a .17 BAC, and then a second driving under the influence conviction from March of 2018 with a .13 BAC. And so that was the reason the board denied the initial application, which was made in July following those 2 DUI convictions. Petitioner signed his petition on September of 2022, and the board received it. One of the noteworthy things is the petitioner has completed Maximus. He completed Maximus in May of 2022, and petitioner's probation will roughly terminate in May of 2024 unless this board grants his petition for early termination and decides to terminate his probation following the hearing today. With that, Your Honor, I can turn to the exhibits, and we can just go through those and get them marked for identification and admitted.
All right, you can proceed.
All right, Exhibit 1 is the decision and order in this case. It's pages 1 through 32. Ask that be marked for identification as a jurisdictional document, and ask that that be admitted into evidence.
Mr. Gaddis, do you object to me considering, or the board considering Exhibit 1 for jurisdictional purposes?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, Exhibit 1 will be admitted for jurisdictional purposes.
Exhibit 2 and Exhibit 3. Exhibit 2 is the notice of hearing from the board for today's matter, and then Exhibit 3 is the notice of hearing from my office. Those are pages 33 through 41. I'd ask that Exhibit 2 be marked for identification and Exhibit 3 be marked for identification for jurisdictional purposes, and the petitioner obviously is present here today. I'd ask that those be admitted into evidence.
Mr. Gaddis, do you object to the board considering Exhibits 2 and 3 to establish jurisdiction?
No objection.
Exhibits 2 and 3 are admitted for jurisdictional purposes.
Exhibit 4, I've broken into a number of different parts. So they are pages 42 through page 142. They are the petitioner's petition in this matter. And Exhibit 4 includes a list of completed education and treatment, a notice of completion of the 18-month offender program as part of his criminal process, a notice of completion of the Maximus recovery program, his logs for 12-step AA from page 49 to 88, his certificates for continuing education credits from page 89 to 138, the narrative statement, page 139 to 140, and then 2 letters of support at page 141 and page 142. I'd ask that Exhibit 4 be marked for identification and admitted into evidence.
Mr. Gaddis, do you object to Exhibit 4 being used as evidence?
No objection.
Exhibit 4 is admitted.
Exhibit 5 is the final probation report from probation monitor Monty Martin following the filing of petition in this case. Asked Exhibit 5 be marked for identification and moved into evidence.
Mr. Gaddis, do you object to Exhibit 5 being considered as evidence?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 5 is admitted.
Exhibit 6 is a partial a portion of petitioner's relevant probation file to today's matter, and that's pages 163 through 235, includes quarterly compliance reports and relevant probation monitor notes. I'd ask that that be marked for identification and moved into evidence.
Mr. Gaddis, do you object?
I do not.
Exhibit 6 is admitted.
Exhibit 7 is the petitioner's partial maximus file. It is pages 236 to 265, relevant to today's proceedings. I'd ask that Exhibit 7 be marked for identification and admitted into evidence.
Mr. Gaddis, do you object?
I do not.
Exhibit 7 is admitted.
And then finally, Exhibit 8 we received this morning. It's a completion certificate of drug and alcohol awareness class completed January 13th of this year. I'm asked that it be marked as Exhibit 8, and I'd ask that it be admitted into evidence.
Mr. Gaddis, do you object?
I do not.
Exhibit,
Should we redact his birth date from Exhibit 8?
yes, thank you. I'm going to cover redactions. Exhibit 8 is admitted, and as the member noted, the date of birth appears on Exhibit 8. I'm going to hand that back to you at some point, Mr. Gaddis, to have you redact that. That can be redacted simply on my copy. The copy that you distributed to the board members, you're welcome to redact that if you'd like, but those won't be the official part of your record. I also noted, Mr. Gadget, that Exhibits 1 through 7 do contain redactions.
They do.
But to the extent that in the review of the evidence, I discovered that there are any pieces of information that were missed, do the parties consent to have me apply those redactions after the fact?
No objection by my office.
I accept.
Okay. In doing so, I'm not undertaking any responsibility to do any redactions. That is the responsibility of the parties. But in the event that I see something that needs to be redacted, I'll now be empowered to make that redaction independently. All right. Thank you, Mr. Gadget. Anything else before you call your witness?
No.
Okay. Would you like to call your witness now?
Yes.
Okay.
The board, or I call Monty Martin as a witness.
All right. Good morning, sir. Good morning. I note that you do not have a microphone, so maybe we can share. All right. Can I have a testing 1, 2, 3 for our videographer?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
All right. I see a thumbs up. Good. In a moment, you'll be asked some questions first by Mr. Gadget. Then Mr. Gaddis will have a chance to ask you some questions, and then I'll give the board members a chance to ask you some questions. Please keep in mind a few things while you testify. Number one, we have a court reporter, so we need to make sure that we speak loudly enough, slowly enough, and one at a time enough that she can make out who's speaking and what they're saying. Secondly, we need to make sure that we use words as opposed to gestures or non-word sounds. Finally, if the court reporter needs to interrupt at any point to ask you to repeat something, she's asking you to say the exact same thing you just said, but louder and slower. She does not need you to clarify what you said or provide additional testimony. She just didn't hear what the word or phrase you used. Make sense?
Yes.
All right, I'll have you raise your right hand so I can swear you in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you'll give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, can I have you state and spell your name for the record, please?
My name is Monty Martin. First name Monny, last name Martin.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Martin. And Mr. Gadget, you can proceed as you see fit.
Mr. Martin, how are you employed?
I am the probation monitor for the Physical Therapy Board of California.
And what's a probation monitor?
Probation monitor monitors physical therapy and physical therapy assistant licensees that have had their licenses placed on probation, and the probation monitor makes sure that they are in compliance with the probation or disciplinary order.
So when a licensee's license is placed on probation, can you just take us briefly through what happens? How do they end up with you?
Well, when their license is placed on probation, they're given a disciplinary order that contains probationary terms that they're required to be in compliance with in order to keep their license, basically. So as the probation goes on, I monitor them, I check in with them on a quarterly basis to make sure that they are complying with those probationary terms in the disciplinary order.
And how long have you been in that role?
Since 2007.
Do you know the petitioner, George Gaddis?
I do.
How do you know him?
He is one of the licensees that I monitor.
And in preparation for today's hearing, did you write a report?
I did.
And if you could look in the binder in front of you, I've given you a copy. Exhibit 5, do you recognize that? And take your time.
Yes, I recognize this.
And what is this?
This is the report I wrote for this hearing.
Generally, is the petitioner in compliance with his probation terms?
He is.
And of note, what major terms has he already completed as part of his probation?
I believe he's completed all the major requirements.
So he's done Maximus. What are some other major requirements he's completed?
Maximus, he's completed the California law exam. He's completed all education courses he was required to take. He attended health support groups for 2 years while he was in Maximus. He's been biologically tested since entering into the Maximus program and including after completing that program.
What is Maximus?
Maximus is the board's substance abuse rehabilitation program.
And how would you describe that program?
It's a program that consists of health professionals. They're required to drug test in that program. There's a range of drug tests they can be required to take. For Mr. Gaddis, I believe it was anywhere from 52 to 104 tests per year. They're required to go to health support groups. Like I said, that would be, depending on the person, 2 to 4 times a week, meeting with other health support professionals, talking about their issues. Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, I believe those are required 90 and 90 days upon entering into Maximus, and then those get slowly reduced as he goes throughout the program.
Would you say it's a pretty intensive course of programming and work that you have to do?
Yes,
And he completed that program.
he did.
Is he still doing Alcoholics Anonymous, as you know?
I believe he is doing that on his own still.
And is he still doing alcohol testing?
Yes.
And what is his current alcohol testing requirement?
I believe that's 36 to 104 times a year.
And could you just describe for the board members what currently that looks like? How often he has to check in? How often, when he has to test, what does that look like? Just so they have an idea of kind of what the current requirements are.
Okay, so Mr. Gaddis is required to check in with our vendor, Vault Inc. They handle our testing. Checking in means he has to either log in online, call in, or check in via app every day to see if he's required to test that day. If he is, there's a window of opportunity for him to test that day. If he's not required to test that day, then he just goes on with his normal day.
And if he is required to test that day, what does he have to do?
He has to provide a urine sample at one of our testing facilities.
Are there any other terms and conditions he has to comply with currently with his probation that you can think of on a daily basis?
On a daily basis, it's just checking in for testing and just complying with the standard terms and conditions of his probation.
How about on a quarterly basis? Does he have to make a report with you periodically?
Yes, he sends in quarterly reports to me, verification of his hours worked, and we have a quarterly interview.
All right. I did notice in reviewing his probation file that after he completed Maximus, there was a letter, a notice of probation violation. So I would like you to turn to page 230 in Exhibit 6. All right. Do you recognize this?
I do.
And what is this?
This is a notice of probation violation letter that I wrote to Mr. Gaddis.
Okay, now the date on this is October 17, 2022. So this is after he petitioned for early termination, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about this? What was this in response to?
On October 15, Mr. Gaddis was selected for biological fluid testing. I spoke about a time window that the licensees have to get the testing done when they are selected for testing, and Mr. Gaddis failed to provide a biological sample within that time window on that date.
And when you were looking into this, did you investigate kind of the circumstances of that violation?
I did.
And what did you learn?
I learned that Mr. Gaddis had woken up early that day to go help his mother with some repairs on her house. I understand that because his routine was altered a little bit, he forgot to check in that morning of the 15th. However, he did check in later in the day, found that he did need to test that day and planned to do so. However, when he did, the testing window for that day was already closed. Mr. Gaddis explained to me that when he was in Maximus, the window to test was different than when he was done with Maximus and just testing with the board. I checked with our lab vendor, Vault Inc., and they did confirm that information. So I alerted Mr. Gaddis that although he was in violation of that term, I would just give him a warning because he was used to the different testing window. We explained what the current testing window for him was. He agreed to abide by that in the future, and we moved on.
And so to clarify some questions that maybe the board members have, Maximus had a different time period that he could test where the Vault program had maybe a shorter window of time, and so he just lost track that in the Vault period of time to test in that time frame as opposed to when he was in Maximus?
Yes, I believe the deadline for Maximus was 8 p.m. and with Vault it was 5 p.m.
Now, I seem to think that when I was reviewing this file, and correct me if I'm wrong, he did actually on his own go get a test that day, correct?
He did.
Okay, and so he provided a test that day on his own responsibly, even though he had missed the Vault window. What was the result of that test?
The test was negative.
Okay. Has he ever had a positive test for Maximus or when he was testing for the board outside of Maximus?
No.
Okay. How do you view this violation? Was it a major violation, minor violation, or something where a warning was sufficient and really just appeared to be just kind of a part of circumstances?
I would consider it a very minor violation, just part of circumstances. Like I said, I thought a warning was appropriate, and that's what I did.
And this violation didn't have any impact on your view that the petitioner was in compliance of his probation?
It did not.
Okay. As you sit here today, has he paid all of the fines and fees that are owed to the board, and is he current?
Yes.
Do you have an opinion as to whether he is a good candidate for termination of his probation?
I would say he is.
And can you elaborate?
Mr. Gaddis has been very compliant throughout probation. I never have to remind him to submit any paperwork. He shows up for his interviews on time. All reports that I've received from his supervisors have been positive. All reports I received from Maximus regarding his participation in that program were also positive.
Would you describe him as an exemplary candidate of the probation program at the Physical Therapy Board?
I would.
Okay. I have no further questions for this witness.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gadget. Mr. Gaddis, do you have any questions for this witness?
I do. More clarification on the incident that transpired on October 15th.
Okay, you can direct those questions to the witness.
Mr. Martin, firstly, thank you for being here and sharing your testimony. It's appreciated by me and I'm sure everybody here. Just some clarification, you described that I had a window to submit a biological test, but just to clarify, is that submit a biological test or to just check in for the day?
That's to submit the, well, there's a window for both. One's to check in and one is to provide the sample as well.
Okay, and are those both the same cutoff time?
I would say no, because you would need to go provide the sample if you had to check in. So I would think that the cutoff time to check in would be different than the cutoff time to provide the sample.
Okay. Would you agree that the window that I missed was just for the check-in portion for the day?
I don't know that I could say that definitively, but I would say yes, because we did get a sample result in a reasonable amount of time that I would expect for someone if they had tested that day.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gaddis. Mr. Gadget, any follow-up?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Martin, I'm going to give the board members a chance to see if they have any questions for you, starting with the board member to my furthest to my left.
I have no questions for you, Money.
I have no questions at this point.
I have no questions.
I have no questions.
None.
No questions.
All right, Mr. Gadget, may this witness be excused?
He may. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Gaddis, do you object to me excusing this witness?
I do not object.
All right, Mr. Martin, thank you for your time and testimony today. You're excused as a witness. Mr. Gadget, anything else before I turn it over to petitioner?
No further witnesses. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gadget. Mr. Gaddis, that takes us now to your evidence. As I said, you can testify on your own behalf, you can call additional witnesses, and you can present additional documents. If you'd like to testify on your own behalf, or at least if you'd like to do that first, let me know and I'll swear you in. Or if you'd like to call your next witness or your other witness first, we can do that.
I would like to make a testimony first, Your Honor.
Okay, I'll have you raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you'll give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, you can put your hand down if you'd like. I'll have you state and spell your name so the record gets it clearly.
My name is George Gassan Gaddis, first name George, middle name Ghassassan, last name Ghattas.
All right, thank you. You don't have to ask yourself questions that you then answer. You can just explain in your own words what you think the board should know when deciding this case. Keep in mind the board does have the petition packet and the supporting documents, so you don't need to necessarily repeat anything that's already in there, and the focus is on rehabilitation. But with that said, you can proceed as you see fit.
Thank you. Firstly, I'm extremely grateful and appreciative to be here today in front of you, to be able to share my growth over these past 3.5 to 4 years. I've been practicing physical therapy under the agreed upon stipulation for the past 4 years, and it's been a true honor. My initial application, like we talked about, was denied for a violation in 2014, driving under the influence, and subsequently in 2017. The first DUI, I did complete all court-ordered repercussions, which was a 6-month DUI program, a fine, and 30 days jail time. I was really disappointed and embarrassed at the first one, and I thought that I had fully, recovered from that, but I did not. Apparently, I drove under the influence in 2017 and was convicted in 2018 for my second DUI. As hard it was to kind of go through the second DUI, it was a low point in my life, but looking back, I am grateful that it happened. just the fact that it really kind of pushed me to address some things that I've been neglecting in the past. You know, some of the repercussions that came from the second DUI included in the 18-month offender program, a fine and jail time, and because it happened in Sacramento County, I actually was required to spend 72 hours behind bars, which never in my life did I envision myself being there. And I was scared, I was disappointed, I was embarrassed, I was confused, and how did I let myself get to that point? And, you know, did I ruin my chance of becoming a physical therapist? I mean, these are all questions that were going through my head as I was sitting there. After a year since my license was originally denied, we, you know, decided on the current stipulation, which required me to do Maximus and biological testing, amongst other things. But at the time, I wasn't thrilled about the terms, but I committed to myself that you know, I needed to be pushed and to grow in the direction that I wanted to get to, and to become the person that I thought I could be and that I wanted to be. As we stated earlier, Maximus was an intensive recovery program, but I believe it was structured that way to give individuals like myself the tools to improve themselves in the present and to maintain sobriety long-term. Within Maximus, requirements were AA meetings, which we kind of talked about before, and those were required every day initially, and they were reduced to 3 times a week once I began working as a therapist, and then were just encouraged towards the end of Maximus, and I still attend those weekly. Through AA, I was able to gain and learn kind of the sense of community and how important that was. And to be able to go through the 12 steps with my sponsor, Bill, and be able to kind of identify my emotional liabilities and to, you know, really address probably one of the most influential times in my life, the passing of my father when I was 10 years old. Come to find out, I just didn't appropriately heal from that. And I, you know, still had a lot of ghosts in my closet, and, you know, that and not addressing those things really kind of took up the real estate in my mind to be able to work through some trying times, and so the little things really start to spill over and, you know, have the potential to be the cause of, you know, why I had those incidents happen. So it was really important for me to go through that, and I'm really appreciative. And with Bill, you know, we still have conversations, and we kind of developed this relapse prevention program that we'll kind of get to in a little bit, but a big part of my life. And going into Maximus, also the health professional meetings, those were required 2 times weekly for me, and they dropped down to once a week once I began work, and then subsequently fell off on my last year of Maximus. But with those events, I was able to kind of learn and understand the importance of perspective. You know, me and another person can hear the exact same thing and perceive it completely different. And, you know, as easy as that sounds, I always just kind of thought I knew what the other person was thinking, and, you know, had my own thoughts about those things, and didn't understand, like, they just could be thinking the exact different thing, and it could be actually good when I thought it was bad, or vice versa, and that was really important to go through. And our health professional meetings were ran by a family marriage therapist, and really guided me through the importance of not only understanding that I don't know what somebody else is thinking, but that somebody doesn't know what I'm thinking. And to be able to communicate what I think, what I feel, and what I need effectively was important in all aspects of life. You know, my relationship with my girlfriend of 4 years has been amazing. Just the fact that we have that better communication, and I'm able to kind of tell her, you know, things that, I'm feeling more effectively. And similarly in my job, just being able to communicate in tough times and things like that, instead of, kind of keeping everything in and then it blowing up to this kind of, bigger issue. Another portion of recovery was biological testing. While I was in Maximus kind of oversaw the testing. And kind of what was stated before, I never had a missed check-in with Maximus. I never had a positive test, at a range test, anything of that nature. But I did have to check in every single day, and with that, had to kind of plan throughout my day, like if I needed to go test throughout the day, can I make it at lunchtime? Do I have to go at work? In our community, in our town is relatively smaller, and so there wasn't a whole lot of access to, clinics to go test who had a male that had to observe my tests. And so sometimes that was very difficult. I had, if the person that I usually test with wasn't there, I had to go to a separate clinic, which took a little bit longer. And so all these different things, naturally added a little bit more stress throughout my day. But including, similarly, when I went to go travel, I had to make sure that I had testing sites available, which is always a little bit more difficult on the weekends. For example, I just went up north to a more remote beach area, and the closest place to test if I required to was 2 hours away, right? So all those things kind of are things that are necessary to think about and a responsibility of mine to do. And with that said, I believe that really allowed me to improve my management of time, my planning, and to really kind of help reduce my stress. Things that I learned throughout the program is one of the best ways to handle my stress is to take action, right? There's things that I can control, and if I can control those things, I can keep the stress down to a minimum, and that's kind of what it was for me. I almost always, except for that one day, check in super early, just so I can understand, hey, do I have to test? Is the person at the clinic that I usually test at, so I can make sure I can go at lunchtime. If not, I would, make sure I go to this other clinic, but it would take usually about an hour to get done instead of the 10, 15 minutes. Just to make sure I didn't miss time for work, or if I needed to, be able to communicate those things to my supervisor. I think that's really big lessons learned for me, because I do have a tendency to kind of get really anxious about the little things. And just the fact that I was able to kind of learn about time management a little bit better and planning, that was a big part of my recovery. As I shifted away from Maximus, the board directly supervised my biological tests. And, I had this incident October 15th where I missed a check-in. To me, it was a fluke thing for me. I was remodeling my mother's kitchen. I got up before the time allotted to check in, and so I was like, oh, I'll just check in a little bit, and everything kind of fell out of play. My intention was never to not submit a test or hide anything, and I realized that I did that, and I missed a check-in, so I kind of planned everything and got a test in just because I wasn't, like I said, trying to hide anything, and got that done. But as unfortunate as that event was, I think it was important for me because we did have a development of this kind of relapse prevention program, and that kind of kick-started that, right? And so usually what was planned is if something like that happened is I would contact my sponsor, and my sponsor is the person who can kind of assess the situation and administer repercussions if necessary. And with the communication, kind of told him everything that happened. He decided that we just needed to meet on a more consistent basis. So we usually meet about once a month, twice a month. But he's like, I want to meet with you weekly. I want to go over things and understand, like, hey, was there some underlying issue that caused this, and whatnot. So he believed that this was just a minor incident, just kind of what Monty said as well. But as we kind of finished our time together, it just didn't sit right with me. Like what I mentioned earlier, it was always the little things that just piled up, and I just never addressed it, thinking that they were just these little mistakes and they would kind of turn into this bigger issue. So talked about those things with my sponsor, and we kind of decided that I should do an awareness course. And that's where the 8-hour course comes into play, because we both felt better about that moving forward to, kind of make sure that I address the little thing, and so it doesn't blow up into something more. With that said, all these things that happen, including the relapse prevention program kind of going into effect and kind of trialing that, is that it kind of gives a little bit of confidence, understanding like, hey, like I can do this. Like this is something that I want to do and I'm able to do long term, which is great. And our recovery program and being in probation is kind of structured that way too, right? As you move along, things kind of start to reduce off, the training wheels come off, so to speak, and that really gives you the belief in yourself and the confidence that you can continue to do this, forever, really. And that kind of really takes me, I'm watering up, I can't even see what I wrote, but that kind of takes me into the reasons behind asking for termination. Is first and foremost, I really do think it's gonna help my recovery. I think I'm ready, and I think the last test is to see if I'm able to do it, right? I think I've learned a lot of things throughout the program. I've been able to create a really amazing support group with my girlfriend, with my sponsor, my colleagues at work, and my family, my friends. I just have a good group of people around me. And I have things in place to, understand if something were to happen, that there's this whole separate thing that needs to come along with that, and to provide that support. So I believe that I can do it. I think that's really great for me. Secondly, I have a big passion to become an educator. That is something that's always been a goal in my life. I love knowledge and to grow and to be a scholar. Those are things that I want and hope to be. I want to be teaching in a PT program, maybe even sitting where you guys are at some point in my life. But aside from all those things, I really enjoy the coaching and the teaching and the mentoring of the next generation. I was a coach for 10 years, prior to PT school and all that kind of stuff. I just really enjoy, being an influence to kind of the younger generation. And just from what I've experienced and learned, I think I have a lot of wisdom to share. And that's something that, I hold value to. And with that said, the experience portion of getting into education is important. And under this current stipulation, I am not allowed to be a CI. And that's kind of the first step for me, to have a student under my wing and to kind of allow them, to watch them grow and to teach them things. And that would be really great. I completed, throughout recovery, I went through an accredited orthopedic specialty program and studied, and then eventually didn't pass my first year, but continued to study and then passed my second year and got my board certification in orthopedics. So it was during my recovery and during COVID and all those things. But I think, that just shows that I really want to be in education. And that's the first step for me, not only to build myself up as a professional and to make sure that I have, that excellence, but to be able to have the knowledge to teach somebody along the way. And then going into the third component, really has to do with self-care for me. My girlfriend and I really love to travel. We love to go to national parks. We love to go out of state. Her family's from the East Coast. And I have family scattered through the U.S. as well. And we want to start traveling outside of the U.S. and things of that nature. And Not saying we can't do those things, but we kind of mentioned earlier, it's really tough to, find locations, particularly in remote areas or national park areas, just to plan these weekends that, are a little bit longer. I mean, 2 to 3 days, it's typically okay, but, when I go to the East Coast for a week to 10 days, I do have to test, and, there's just the different atmosphere in clinics. It just, it can be a lot in terms of stress and those things. So it kind of turns you off about doing those on a consistent basis. But it's really important to have, those ways to, clear your mind and those personal space and things of that nature. So that's another reason. And then lastly, really is just the kind of reality of the situation. I'm fortunate enough to be working and have been working, since being on probation, but there's a financial aspect. I just came out of PT school. I have a lot of student debt, and it would, be nice to shunt the probationary costs into my debt and kind of relieve some of that stuff. That's just the reality of the situation. But like I said, those are really the main reasons for me requesting termination of probation. For me to continue my recovery, most importantly, to progress towards being an educator, and for self-care. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gaddis. Mr. Gatcha, any questions?
Just some clarifying questions, Your Honor, and just a few extras. You said Bill. Is Bill your sponsor?
Yes.
How long has Bill been your sponsor?
He's been really since the beginning. I was fortunate enough to find him, but it's been since I started Maximus.
So approximately 4 years?
Yes.
And you were saying in your testimony that Exhibit 8, which is Certificate of Completion from the awareness program, the drug awareness program, that was on your own, correct, with Bill?
Correct.
Board did not impose that on you. Mr. Martin did not impose. You on your own chose to do that.
That is correct.
And from your testimony, I understood, turn my mic on. From your testimony, I understood it was because you recognized with Bill that there needed to be maybe a consequence for the fact that you had this missed check-in.
More of a consequence, yes.
All right. Number 4 of your goals to have early termination of probation was removal of probationary costs. What roughly are your probationary costs per year right now?
Maximus was a huge cost, which was taken off in the final year, but I still, monthly, I probably spend anywhere from $600 to $800 in testing. And then I think there's a quarterly fee of like $100 to the board, which is not a lot. When I was in Maximus, that was an additional $500 a month. And then when I was in support group, it was an additional $250 a month. And so those costs really did add up.
Okay. All right. I saw in the Maximus documentation in Exhibit 7, pages 256 and 257, it appeared there were some minor issues with Maximus early in your program. I just wanted to have a chance to tell us about that. I noticed one was on page 256, not uploading a passport photo in a period of time, and then the other was not having a recovery agreement dated and submitted in a time frame. And this was in, I guess, your first year roughly of probation. Can you just tell us about kind of what these were and how you dealt with them and how you got past some of those initial issues?
Yes. The first one, the not submitting a photo, I mean, that was part of the initial requirement on Maximus, is that you had to submit a photo of yourself just for their records. And apparently I didn't do that. And so I received this and I immediately contacted my case manager at the time, and she was like, oh, just upload a photo. And so I did those things. Again, this was probably right when I entered Maximus. And then the recovery agreement. So periodically, typically it happens after I have each quarter when you kind of meet with your probation monitor, meeting with Monty, then you meet with your case manager, and they have their own meeting together as well. And then even if nothing's changed, they will like make you re-sign the contract. And you have 10 business days to sign the contract, and I don't remember this one, but apparently I didn't sign it within the 10 days, but typically they just ask you to sign it as soon as possible, and I did that. So, again, this was relatively early within my Maximus career.
And I mean, I'll note for the record, those were the only 2 hiccups I saw in the Maximus documentation. You were talking about with your sponsor, Bill, the development of a relapse treatment plan. Can you tell us about that? What is that?
Yeah, absolutely. The rehab prevention program is really structured around Bill being my contact person when something goes wrong. I mean, we text and talk. We text all the time, but in terms of like meeting for like true recovery things, you know, he's known my path and understands where I've come from, including issues, you know, at an early age, and you know what I'm dealing with the board, things of that nature. And so we kind of talked about like, hey, once this is all done, what are you going to do if something happens, or when you're, you know, those types of different things. So, and we talked about some repercussions that would happen depending on severity. And there's a couple, you know, he kind of has, you know, the authority over which he's going to pick for me to do, but it could be anywhere from, like I said, him and I meeting on a more consistent basis, starting to be required to do more AA meetings, anywhere from like 3 to 5 times a week, or even having to do daily meetings again, to, you know, more intensive stuff where God forbid something happens, that I would go into an intensive outpatient program. So there's definitely different severity levels that him and I have talked about, and he just gets to make the judgment call depending on things that happen.
What is your sobriety date?
April 14th, 2019.
If you're taken off probation, do you plan on returning to alcohol use in any way?
No.
And I noticed in the Maximus documentation, when you were intaked, when you went through intake in that program, that you'd had marijuana use in the past. Are you currently using marijuana in any way?
I am not.
Do you have any plans to return to that?
No.
If you're taken off probation, what is your plan regarding attending AA? Are you still going to go once a week, or less, or what are your thoughts on that?
My AA attendance is not going to change. I'm going to go to weekly meetings like I have been. And I think that's a commitment to not to myself, but also the other members of the community.
And your sponsor in AA, how long has he been in the program? Do you know, or approximately?
His sobriety date's actually 2 days before mine, and he's going to hit 18 years this year.
I noticed, you know, it was interesting to me when you were getting into Maximus that your jobs before obviously being a physical therapist were as a bartender. Do you miss that culture at all, the bar culture at all, or is that part of your life now kind of behind you?
I never really enjoyed being a bartender, if I were to be honest, but no, I mean, it's completely different. I think I learned a lot of things from there in terms of like interacting with people that are helpful, kind of what I do on a daily basis. So that's exciting. And just to point out, even when I was a bartender, I still worked a little bit, you know, for cost stuff, even as I started recovery, and I was still testing negative. I never drank or did anything, even while I was working some of those things along the way. So I don't do it anymore, and I don't plan to, no.
In terms of being a physical therapist now, and you've been doing it now for a number of years, what are like the 2 things that you really love about the profession? 2 biggest.
Yeah, in terms of being a physical therapist, I think, you know, first and foremost is being able to guide somebody back into the things they want to do. You know, and that kind of is just so great into seeing how somebody, the things that are make their life desirable are taken away from them. and then you're able to kind of plug it back into the life. You know, whether it's getting them back to it fully or, you know, having to modify things for them to really find joy in their life again, that's amazing. I really have an affinity for kids. I did a lot of pediatric stuff when I was doing my clinicals and things of that nature. And for me, it's, you know, developmental stuff for kids. I work in the outpatient setting, if I wasn't clear about that earlier, but I had a kiddo come to me who, you know, dealt with torticollis, but it ended up being an underlying developmental issue. And I ended up working with him for almost 3 years, and, you know, getting him to walk and, you know, just having that relationship with family members. I mean, it's that in and itself is amazing. And being in this profession and being able to treat is huge for my recovery, just as a whole in general, just for that reason.
And as you look back now on the DUI convictions that you suffered, you are aware as a health provider that the worst repercussions of those acts, driving under the influence, could lead someone to have to require the services of you as a physical therapist to actually return to function if there were an accident. You understand that?
I do.
Okay. And have you thought about that at all in terms of, you know, as you look back on your former self, you know, what you would say to your former self now that you're in the healthcare profession?
I haven't thought about that, no.
Okay. What would you say to your former self?
Why were you such an idiot? You know, you don't, when you're in the act, you don't really think about other people. And I think that's been a big part of recovery, is that, you know, I can control the things that I can control in myself, but no matter what, my actions and the things that I've done will impact people. And they have the potential to impact people greatly. And you know, I strive to be someone who, you know, wants to help people and make people better. And, you know, for me to harm somebody in any type of way or harm somebody's family member, you know, is devastating in my mind. And that's kind of what I mean. Like, why are you such an idiot? How did you not think about those other people? And I don't want to have that feeling. I don't want it.
I have no further questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gadget. I'm now going to give the board members a chance to see if they have any questions for you, starting with the furthest on my left.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Of all of the probationary terms that you have currently, which would be the most burdensome, in your opinion?
I think, you know, I think this kind of goes back into Maximus. I think one of the hardest things, which was the most beneficial, was health professional meetings. And the reason why is just because it wasn't in my town. I had to drive and commute, you know, an hour there and back just to go to the meetings twice a week. But at the same token, I really enjoyed the relationships with the other health professionals, because, you know, I think there's, just in our workplace, how, you know, you can have stressors of different environment. There was actually a situation at work where, you know, I was really upset. This was during COVID, and there was something happened, and I was really upset because I thought, you know, I was being, I don't know, focused on or kind of nitpicked at, and, you know, they kind of flipped the perspective on me, like, hey, they actually just really care about you, man. Like, why are you thinking that it's always a negative thing? And so the reason for that is probably, you know, just a lot of the commuting. And that's similar to like testing when I go traveling. But, you know, I feel like I don't have, you know, everything has been tolerable. I've been able to do everything. And so I'm grateful that I've had the capability to do so.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
First, I want to say congratulations on the journey that you've made so far.
Thank you.
It sounds like you've made a lot of progress personally and professionally. So I want to just applaud your success with that
Thank
to
you.
this point. A couple of questions. With regard to the missed check-in situation, do we know if that would have been a day that you would have been required to test?
I personally don't have that information because if I'm out of, typically if I'm out of the time frame, I don't get any response. It's just gray. So I don't know. Typically, it was on Saturday, I believe, if that's correct. And it's very rare that I tested on the weekends, but I wasn't sure, and that's why I submitted a test.
Okay. Are you a sponsor?
Not specifically, no. I do, as I've gone through, the program, I have some really great people that I've met who still contact me about certain things, but in terms of sitting there, I started to, but I've never actually really, nobody's lasted long enough for me to take them through the 12 steps.
Is that something that you want to do?
Absolutely. It kind of falls in, to the same, category of me wanting to give back and help. I mean, that's a big part of the 12th step, right? Is kind of give back to all those things. And, if somebody approaches me, I'm welcoming them open arms, but it just hasn't happened for me yet.
And then the last question I have is, have you been in situations where alcohol has been available or present? And what did you do? How did you react?
Yeah, I mean, there's some situations that I just don't allow myself to go into, just because, I won't go and like sit at a bar and to like, those types of different things. But I've had instances where, even at, a family barbecue or something, my sisters will have a beer or whatnot. And similarly, I've as recovery got farther and farther and I went through, I was able to kind of plug myself back into, some social environments, Super Bowl parties, things of that nature. And I don't know what it is, but I think just the work that I've done for me, I just have no desire to do that. I mean, I'm totally okay with drinking water and coffee. I mean, those are the things that I drink. And, if I ever get myself in an uncomfortable situation, I just know, and then I kind of leave. I think I try to surround myself, and this kind of goes into my social groups changing, right? People that surround me are, people that understand where I am in my recovery and respect it. And so if they never put me in a situation to feel uncomfortable. And if I am, I let them know, and I kind of just move on.
Thank you.
So I wrote down 4 questions, and you answered 2 of them with your presentation, so thank you for that. I was wondering, you have 2 DUI convictions. Can you estimate how frequently you drove under the influence but were not stopped?
I don't know that I can. I think during that age range when I was there, more so prior to my first conviction, I did it multiple times.
Okay. So you realize how frequently you put the public in danger?
I did, yeah.
And then my last question is, have you ever treated a patient under the influence or were somewhat hungover while treating patients?
I wouldn't say that I did somebody who was hungover. I mean, there was somebody that was hungover, but, they were at a point where I, like, hey, 1, were you okay to drive here? And 2, I don't think this is appropriate for you to be here right now. But more so, I've treated people who have been in recovery, and I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I didn't present my question clearly. Have you ever treated a patient while you were hungover?
Absolutely not. Since I've been sober is the only time that I've been licensed to practice. So, and I've never once, and don't intend to ever.
Thank you.
So, thank you for coming here today, and I want to start off by saying that listening to your testimony, I believe you. and I believe in you.
I appreciate it.
Like you, yeah, you said some things that resonated with me personally. When you were speaking about the testing locations and having difficulty finding them, especially in remote locations, we've heard that before, but we usually hear it as an excuse, and you did not present it that way. And so that's part of why I believe you. You said you were confused while you were in jail. Can you just expound a little bit? Because I know nobody wants to be in jail,
Right.
of course, but you went through all these emotions, and when you said you were confused, can you just expound a little bit on what that confusion was about? Was it internal? What was it?
Sure. I mean, it was definitely internal, right? Just like I said, I really did try to hold myself like as a higher standard. I believed in education. I was always that, person, who got, if not straight A's, 1B, you know what I mean? So I really kind of held my own to that standard, and I was getting prepared to go into, PT school and becoming this professional, and people believed as that too. From the outside looking in, and it's like, well, hey, like, I'm confused. What did I miss about myself that got me in this situation? And, how did I not learn from it the first time? And, things of that nature. And so those are, especially when you're sitting there, all the stuff happening around here, just like, what the heck is going on, right? And so that's more so where that confusion was.
As Dr. Drummer alluded to, I'm very appreciative of you taking us through your recovery journey as well. I like the fact that you seem to be a person who thinks ahead and that you took this process seriously. When I hear Monty say that you were a very stellar participant, that means a lot, especially coming from this gentleman who knows his business, and he's worked with so many folks. So that also lends itself to me believing in you. And so I hope that does not change. It doesn't seem like it's going to. It seems like that's just part of your character. Especially looking at the letters that folks wrote on your behalf. And there was one more thing. I don't know what I found. Dr. Armstrong, I'm really glad that she really asked you more questions about public protection, because as a member of the public, I really appreciate your self-care and your self-growth and everything that you've learned about yourself, but I also needed to hear what public protection meant to you on my behalf, because I don't want to go see a professional and all he is concerned about is himself. And so thank you so much for sharing today, and I hope you continue. I think you will be an amazing mentor and a sponsor if you decide to do so. And it sounds like that's what you're going to do. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good morning. I want to ask, are you an alcoholic?
I am.
And can you repeat your sobriety date, please?
April 14, 2019.
And have you had any alcohol since then?
I have not.
Your first reason for petitioning for early termination of probation is that you think it'll help with your recovery, and then you describe your support system and those around you. But can you help me better understand how early termination will help you with your recovery?
Sure. Kind of mentioned it earlier, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, but as recovery has gone on with the probation itself, they did a really good job, at least for me, to start to wean off some of like the requirements that people were, other organizations or entities was creating that accountability for me. And as those requirements came off, was I able to continue going to AA meetings? Was I able to continue kind of the healing process on my own? And with termination of probation, that would kind of be the ultimate test. If there is nothing left overlooking my ability to stay sober, am I able to do it on my own? And I think that would be the ultimate test.
Thank you. Makes sense. When the board issues discipline on a license, it's not punitive, it's to protect the public. So I'm happy to hear Deputy Attorney General Gatchett mention his question, as well as Dr. Armstrong and my colleague here, Ms. McMillian. And when I read your personal statement, I did not see inferences about public protection. So again, glad to hear those questions and glad to hear your response. But that is something that the board is really looking for, is the protection of the public. And so any last comments from you?
I do. I mean, I completely understand it, especially coming from, that I did put them in danger. I will, continue to do my best to, give their forgiveness. I still, to this day, and it's not mentioned in anything, but I really try to give back as much as I can. This last Christmas, my girlfriend's really supportive of me and understands like our desire to kind of give back to community. And this Christmas, we were able to kind of fundraise and put some bags together. Made 100 bags this Christmas to give to people in need. Beanies, gloves, shampoos, soaps, toothbrushes, and create this bag and kind of gave it to an organization to pass out for everybody. And, we have this new agency that's coming to kind of passes, I want to do more stuff for this community. I mean, that's, I understand, where everybody's coming from, and I will, as much as I can, try to, to make up for what I did and more. And so that's my desire. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to ask a few questions about the process. I'm sure when you started your education into physical therapy, you had dreams and goals and thoughts of what that was going to be, and it seems as though this incident and the ones surrounding it came pretty early in your professional development. And I'm just wondering, can you kind of share now, going through this at the very beginning stages of, performing these services, how do you think it's changed your view of what you are going to do or how you want to do it as a therapist?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's coming from it now. I think it's given me a little bit more fire, but I don't know if it's necessarily changed it. When everything happened, I think everything got clouded, right? And I was like, oh man, am I able, my goals have always been my goals, and it was just, was I going to get there? I think, and those questions came into play early on, and going through recovery and the things I went through, I knew I wanted to teach, I knew I wanted to get an education. I think they just really heightened, those goals, especially once I got comfortable with recovery. I was like, and then kind of, I mentioned it earlier, but I misunderstood your question, but started to have people come in who were in recovery, who were coming in as patients, and, just being able to, get closer with them because we were both in recovery, and I kind of went through the things that they went through. And then I was like, oh man, this is a great opportunity for me to connect more so with whoever it is in front of me, right? And I can sit here and be, somebody who's trying to hide my recovery, which I'm not, but I think there's power in really understanding and believing who you are and accepting who you are, and helping other people. And so that goal of becoming an educator is still there, and I think, and it's more confidence in me doing it because I think I'm going to be really good at it from all the stuff that I went through. So.
Yeah, thank you. That last question, or you brought up the not being ashamed of it. So your current contemporaries from where you graduated and the people that you worked with around the same time, do they know that this was the process that you went through?
They didn't originally. So a big part of making amends when I went through the 12-step was to do that, right? Some of them, even just my mentors and teachers who, saw the good in me, just didn't know what I went through. And, I've been able to continue to give back. I try to go and be part of interviews for the school when new students come through and to continue to have those relationships with them. And, they do now. And they're as accepting as I thought they would be. And so it's been great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any final questions from board members? All right, seeing none. Mr. Gadget, any follow-up?
No follow-up, thank you.
All right. Mr. Gaddis, is there any other testimony you'd like to offer on your own behalf?
On my own behalf, no.
Okay, I understand you have one more witness.
I do.
Before we do that, I need to check in with our court reporter and see if she needs a break. So let's go off the record. It's been just over an hour. Do you need a minute? 5 minutes. Sure. Yeah, we can stay off the record. It's 10:21 when we come back at 10:25, 10:26. Give you the full 5 minutes. Are you ready? Are you ready to go back on?
I am.
Are you ready to go back on? Our board members, are you ready to go back on? All right, we are back on the record after our morning break. Just one brief housekeeping matter. The record should reflect that during our break, I invited Mr. Gadget to redact Exhibit 8, and Mr. Gaddis checked that and confirmed that that's an appropriate redaction. Let me just confirm that with the parties. Mr. Gadget, is that true?
Yes, that's true.
Mr. Gaddis?
Yes, it's
All
true.
all right, very good. Thank you. Mr. Gaddis, I understand you have one more witness to call?
That is correct.
All right, you may do so.
Cool. I'd like to call Rocky Cisneros.
Okay. Mr. Cisneros, good morning.
Good morning.
You heard my prior statement to our previous witness. Just please make sure that you speak loudly enough, slowly enough, and one at a time enough for our court reporter. Please try not to interrupt anyone, and please make sure that if our court reporter interrupts, that you're just clarifying what you said with repeating it rather than explaining it. I'll have you raise your right hand so I can swear you in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm, under penalty of perjury, that the testimony you'll give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, you can put your hand down if you'd like. I'll have you adjust your microphone so it's more pointed at you. And I'll have you state and spell your name for the record, and while you do that, I'll invite our videographer to give me some sign that he can clearly hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. My legal name is Henry David Cisneros, HenryDavidCisneros, but I'm also known as Rocky Cisneros.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Gaddis, what I'll have you do is just ask some questions, and Mr. Cisneros, just wait for the full question, answer just the question asked, and then wait for a new question. Mr. Gaddis, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Rocky, how long have you known me?
I've known you for 6 years,
And how often do we work together?
daily.
Has there been any instances where you felt I was ever under the influence of drugs or alcohol?
No,
Would you consider the COVID-19 pandemic a trying or stressful time for physical therapy?
indeed, very.
Was ProPT, the clinic you and I both work at, open for in-person treatment?
That's correct.
How would you say I handled being in recovery and managed the added stress of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Like many, you were scared. We were all scared. I think that is when I actually got to see what you were learning applied, and we talked about it in our meetings. And you even confirmed, I think I'm in the right meetings right now to handle this situation. And in comparison to other staff members, employees, providers, you could see the difference. You were applying it, and it also made me want to encourage it and support it and see see the other employees doing well like he was. So, yes, it was a trying time. He got through it. Never affected his work. So, yes, he made it work.
In a phone interview with Mr. Martin, you described me as someone you want to be working in your clinic. Could you elaborate?
George stands out amongst staff in many ways. He's surrounded by great providers, and he's another one that's great. I'm very proud of him in that way. He's always prepared. I think his time management skills are seen. When we need to plan things for his schedule, for patient treatment, or for meetings and such, he's always there, has it done. When emailed about things, asking them to do, George is always one of the first ones to complete the task. Accountability, always on time. I think one time he might have had to wait longer for a testing, and he called me ahead of time and let me know to prepare for that, which I was always ready to help in whichever way. And the timeliness of his check-ins and those things reminded me of his timeliness with his daily notes, which is a challenge to every physical therapist. And George is always up to date and well documented. In addition to helping the other staff find ways to be accurate, quick, and efficient, and compliant. And I do think a lot of the things that George is asked to do, he complies with. So that's why he's the type of guy I'd like to work with.
And Rocky, would you just be willing to make a general statement on my behalf?
Sure. I wrote a letter to support this, and ever since the moment I heard about this, I made the decision that we're going to walk alongside George and support him the whole way, which we have, and he's made that very easy for me to do. He stands out with his staff. His patients absolutely love him. He's a guy you want on your team. I think of recovery programs. We are in rehabilitation ourselves, but as a recovery program, I feel like he's what these recovery programs are made for, and he's done all the things that he's asked. And even better is pay it forward and move it forward, and I think George is always going to do that, and he's already doing those things. I do appreciate the opportunity for him to be here and to present his request, and I'm always going to support him in whatever he does because I believe in him, and I do believe he earned it. I always say that if you earn it, you deserve it. I'm with him on that, and I believe that he's earned this, and it's made him better.
No further questions.
All right, thank you. Mr. Gadget, any cross?
I'll just put some foundation on this. Mr. Cisneros, let's go through your education. Can you just give us your educational background?
Of course. I have a bachelor's in science from Fresno State, a master's in physical therapy from Fresno State, and a doctorate from UCSF/Fresno State.
And could you give us the graduation dates?
2000
the doctorate, fine, yeah.
Okay, that was 2009.
And that's a doctorate in physical therapy?
Yes, sir.
All right. And what's your current job?
I'm the director of the Visalia Clinic in which George works in.
Could you tell us about the Visalia Clinic? How many employees? What kind of licensed staff are there?
We have 8 provider staff licensed. We have 4 physical therapists and 4 PTAs, a handful of aides, and 2 front office. I can't remember what else you asked on that question.
I was just asking the staff size. Approximately how many patients is that clinic seeing a month? Approximation.
1,000.
So it's a pretty big practice.
We are one of the larger clinics within our company, yes.
And this is the clinic in Visalia?
That's correct.
All right. How long have you been licensed with the state of California as a physical therapist?
14 years.
Has your license ever been disciplined?
No.
All right. In the exhibit packet, Exhibit 4, page 142, if you could just turn to that page for me. And the page numbers are at the bottom. They're small. They're for checking eye ability without glasses.
It's the very last page of Exhibit 4.
Yep,
Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is that?
That's a letter I wrote for George,
Okay. And do you stand by everything in that letter?
of course.
You know, a lot of the questions we've had today obviously have been about his recovery. You touched on it some of it with his direct testimony. I just wanted to bring out some more of that. You talked about his documentation. How is the petitioner, and when I say petitioner, I'm referring to Mr. Gaddis, how is he with patients?
He's great.
And could you say why he's great?
George is patient first. He's always our advocate of talking to your patient and spending time with them and making sure that their needs are met prior to, trying to get all our other tasks done. But all of them, he has requests often, and there's a lot of mutual respect. He has a great percent arrival rate, which is always an indicator of how well patients are enjoying their therapy.
And in your letter, it mentioned you're a site supervisor, and I believe that's part of his probation. Can you explain to the board what a site supervisor does?
Yes, along the way, I would do quarterly reports, being like a day-to-day observer, and I would fill out Maximus form, and always kind of just report how George was doing.
And so did you have an opportunity during that time to interface with Mr. Martin at the board?
Yes, he came and met with us one time, and then we'd have phone calls.
And I think in your direct testimony, you testified to it, but you've had no concerns with petitioner while he's been working under your supervision at the clinic.
Absolutely not.
And approximately how many patients does Mr. Gaddis see on a daily basis?
15 to 16.
Mr. Gaddis had stated in his direct testimony that one of the reasons he's seeking early termination of probation is to get into education, to be a supervisor or a mentor. Do those opportunities exist if he is relieved of the probation term such that he can start doing that for prospective physical therapists or trainees?
Yes, I am very looking forward to see George perform that kind of role amongst staff, and that's part of our conversation of goals for the year, in hopes that he could do that to prep him for his future.
Do you think he would be a good mentor and trainer for up-and-coming physical therapists?
I do.
And why do you think that?
Well, he's kind of been there. He's been on both ends of, I guess, I don't want to say the profession, but what can happen in a negative way and in a positive way. And experience is knowledge, and he knows how to share that, and he wants to share that. And I think that's going to best prepare people in the future.
And I know in your letter you had mentioned the OCS. I think that's the orthopedic exam. Can you just explain what that is? So, we know that the petitioner is a physical therapist. We know that he's licensed. We know he's educated. What is the OCS stand for, and what is that in addition to as a physical therapist?
So you could sit for the orthopedic board certification through the APTA. It's an extensive test. It's for orthopedics and specialties, getting you licensed. It's a rigorous test. A lot of people take it, and a lot of people don't pass it. But George didn't pass it, demonstrated resilience in making that a goal to pass it, and then he did.
I have no further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. I'll now give the board members a chance to see if they have any questions, starting with the furthest on my left.
I don't have any further questions.
I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you for your commitment to helping somebody who's gone through this process and standing up as a licensed physical therapist and taking on that role.
I have no questions.
I have no questions, and thank you for participating and supporting.
No questions.
No questions.
All right, Mr. Gaddis, any follow-up questions for your witness?
No questions.
All right, may this witness be excused?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Gatchett, any objection?
No objection. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, Dr. Cisneros, thank you for your time and testimony. You're excused as a witness. All right, Mr. Gaddis, any other evidence on your own behalf that you'd like to offer, either in the form of testimony from you or any other witnesses or any other documentary evidence?
No more evidence.
All right, Mr. Gatchett, any other evidence from the people?
No.
All right. That concludes the evidentiary portion then of the hearing, which leaves then closing argument. Mr. Gatchett, I realize you're not here in an adversarial role and you may not have closing remarks, but if you'd like to make any closing remarks, you may.
The Attorney General's office is going to submit on his petition. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gatchett. Mr. Gaddis, you'll have a chance to make any closing remarks you'd like. As I said, that's a chance for you to summarize what you think the evidence showed and suggest what outcome should happen as a result. Closing remarks are optional. You can choose to make a closing argument if you'd like or not. It's up to you.
The only thing I would like to say is I'm very, very grateful for taking the time to listen to what I had to offer. And I know your time is valuable, and to allow me to sit here today, like I said, I'm extremely, extremely grateful. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to ask then whether the matter is submitted, and by that I mean, are you satisfied you've had a full opportunity to present all evidence and make all argument on your behalf? Mr. Gatchett, is the matter submitted?
Matter submitted. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Gaddis?
Matter submitted.
All right, then the matter is submitted, the case is closed, and we are off the record. Don't leave just yet. I need to give our court reporter a chance to see if she needs any words or terms spelled. Good to go. All right. All right, thank you all very much. I'll turn the meeting back over to President McMillian to handle further business.
Thank you.
So we will move into closed session for about 30 minutes, and then we will, when we return, we will continue with the agenda.
Typically, there's a statement to the petitioner that he won't hear anything today. I don't know.
I covered that in the beginning announcements, yeah. Yeah, but thank you. It's good to have people checking.
Good to go. It is 1:00 p.m. and we are back on schedule with agenda item number 6. Review and approval of December 7th and 8th meeting minutes.
So with a little transition in duties, Kimberly Rozakis is going to present the meeting minutes. She crafted the meeting minutes, so I will just say that this is not an easy task. I think all of you are aware of just review of past minutes, capturing the detail and the action that this board does is an art and a skill. So we've reviewed the minutes and we're happy with them, and we hope that you are as well.
Great. My name is Kim Rozakis, and this is my first meeting minutes, so I guess we can start on page 9. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. Page 13.
I have one. On page 13,
Yes.
line 176, is it supposed to read departments apostrophe S first?
would be possessive.
Thank you. Page 14. Page 15.
Line 245, should that be pursuing? Rather than pursuing?
Yes. Thank you. Page 16.
Oh, could you go back to 15, line 256? Should it be, they will be rejected, be redirected, or be directed, other than it?
Yes, or they will.
It would probably be better if it will be directed to the CPTA website.
Page 16. Page 17. Page 18. Page 19. Page 20. Page 21.
Can you look at page 21, line 459 into line 460? Is it soon-to-be graduates?
Yes.
Okay.
Page 22, on line 506, instead of CPS, it should say CC.
Also, Kim, on line 524, just clarification, is it Dr. Alexandra Jones, or is it Alex? Alexander?
Alexander.
Alexandria.
Yeah.
Page 23.
So line
Yes.
550, I'm just not sure if the sentence should be reworded. Ms. Phelps reported that the number of complaints and arrest conviction reports are reported in performance measure, and then it says one which has, this should be one of which has increased 26%?
Performance measure.
Oh, number one, performance measure reported in performance measure one, which has measured, which is increased, okay. Okay.
For clarity's sake, we'll probably want to put PM1 in parentheses next to it.
Page 24.
Okay, on line 572, is it supposed to read "there were"?
Yes.
Grammar? Okay.
Yeah. Page 25. Page 26. Page 27. Page 28. And page 29.
think we're good.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, so I need a motion.
Yeah.
Can I get a motion to accept the minutes as read?
A move to approve as amended.
Any discussion? Hearing none, motion passes. Public comment. Oh, right. Any public comment? And we can call for a vote.
Tanya McMillian.
Aye.
Dale Armstrong. Karen Brandon. Daniel Drummer.
Aye.
Katarina Eleby.
Aye.
Jonathan Irvin. Jonathan Irvin is absent. Alicia Benamen.
Aye.
6-0, motion carried.
Thank you, Kim. I can't say I would have done that good of a job on my first attempt at writing minutes for a board meeting. 26 pages later.
So moving on to agenda item number 7. We will, it's the president's report. So we'll start off with letter A, and I'm going to come to the front of the dais, and I'm going to invite member Dale Armstrong and member Karen Brandon to the front. We're going to do swearing in. If you two ladies can stand here so that you can get your photos. So I am going to ask you ladies to repeat after me. You have to raise your hand. Can you raise your right hand? And when I say I, after I say I, say your names and then continue to repeat after me. Okay, for oath for the office of board member of the Physical Therapy Board for the state of California, I,
Dale Armstrong. Karen Brandon.
do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the state of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the Constitution
and allegiance to the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the state of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will
and that I will
well and faithfully
well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Welcome to the Physical Therapy Board. So that, Jason, they will,
The calendars.
I mean,
Oh, they've already done.
oh, okay. Now we will move on to agenda item 7B, 2023. So basically, we need to take a look at, everyone take a look at the So now asking, we're taking a look at the 2023 meeting calendar. I'll give you a few minutes to look at it. Jason, are there any comments that you'd like to make? regarding the calendar?
So we are back in Sacramento in June. We don't have any recommended changes to the calendar itself. We have a tentative location for the September meeting in Southern California, but are always looking for additional schools to host for future meetings.
Can you share what that tentative location is? or-
Tentatively, right now, it would be West Coast University. And again, I think we're fairly certain that's where we're going to be. We're just ironing out a few last details. Just kind of a shameless plug for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching from home. We are always looking for additional campuses, and one of the areas that we're really trying to center on is the Bay Area schools. So if anybody watching is hearing the call and would like to host a board meeting, please let us know. That's just something that I was going to say on behalf of April Beauchamp, who's not with us today, and that's just part of that anticipated expectation and trying to fill her shoes while she's gone.
Okay.
Which meeting would it be that would be in the Bay Area?
It would be next March. So this meeting typically is what we try to do is, if we're not here, we're looking for a school that's Northern California for March.
Okay, before we move on to 2024, since we've already voted for these, we don't have to,
Correct. It's just, we want to make sure that there aren't any conflicts or any adjustments that might need to be made based on member schedules or anything like that.
okay,
And again, we have no recommendation for changes of any dates or anything like that.
okay.
No conflicts, however, is June still a 3-day meeting?
June will be a 3-day meeting with the idea of the first day being a strategic planning session.
Okay, moving on to our proposed 2024 meeting calendar. Any discussion on that, Jason?
For our Sacramento meetings, those are pretty much set. We have our own hearing room that we can host in, but again, that's that shameless plug where we're looking for both Bay Area schools and Southern California schools that might be willing to host. So we don't have any locations set just as yet.
Any comments, discussion from fellow board members on the 2024 calendar? Conflicts? None?
And we'll revisit it at the next few meetings just to make sure that, it's a long ways out at this point, but.
Okay. Any public comment on the 2023 or 2024 meeting calendars? Hearing none. We will move on to agenda item number 8, the Executive Officers Report. Mr. Kaiser.
Thank you. First, I would say it's good to see all of you again. And I'd like to, echo the welcome for both Dr. Armstrong and their swearing in and Dr. Brandon and their swearing in. And I would be remiss if I didn't take this time to say thank you to Dr. Drummer. This is his last meeting with us. Swearing out. Touche. On behalf of staff, thank you for your commitment. You've left an indelible mark on this board. From a personal perspective, it's been an honor serving with you. And again, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I will start with staffing. And as I reported back in December, we've had some turbulent times as it pertains to staff and vacancies. And so it continues. First, it's my pleasure to announce the appointment of the board's new Consumer Protection Services Manager, effective February 1st, Carol Phelps. Ms. Phelps. Carol served the board for many years as an enforcement analyst and most recently as the lead analyst over the enforcement unit. She's proven to be an excellent enforcement analyst with a very valuable skill set. She's hit the ground running, and we're happy to have her step up into a managerial role, so thank you, Carol. Secondly, effective February 21st, we welcome a new addition to the PTBC team, Ms. Alicia Hernandez. She's been appointed to the lead analyst position within our administrative services unit, and she'll be responsible for budgets, major equipment, procurement, facilities, contracts, all that is admin related. Prior to serving with us, she served the EDD as an analyst assisting management with developing and monitoring of the budget and preparing budget reports. And she was also responsible for serving as a personnel liaison. Again, a very valuable skill set, and we're happy to have her. And I will make sure to say Alicia and not Alicia, because we're always going to have that confusion. And happy belated birthday, by the way.
Happy belated birthday.
Thirdly, I'd like to have been able to say lastly, but there's more. Staff are just closing out the recruitment process for the manager over the licensing services unit, and expect to make a hire in the very near future. And again, admin staff are recruiting for several vacancies at this point. Currently 2 full-time analysts in the Consumer Protection Services unit, and effective July 1 of this year, 2 full-time analysts in the licensing services unit. And we also have a new addition to the PTBC family. Our outreach liaison has welcomed baby Zinnia into the world. She was born on Valentine's Day, and both mom and baby are well, and April's looking forward to seeing you all at the September meeting. Application services, again, this is just a reminder about influx, right? There are now 23 CAPTI accredited PTA programs in California with another 7 in development. It's not just PTA either. There are now 18 CAPTI accredited programs with 1 in, accredited PT programs with 1 in development. We are anticipating an ongoing increase in apps received, but it's important to kind of keep that in perspective. The 30 some odd, 40 some odd programs, there's still 250 PT programs in the United States and over 350 programs, PTA programs in the United States. And then to add to that, as you'll hear in tomorrow's stat reports, 35% of our application intake is from endorsement candidates or licensees who are coming from out of state. I have to say that I'm impressed with staff's commitment and their will to get people licensed as quickly as possible. They take pride in their work and it shows, so kudos to them. Also kudos to, moving on to Consumer Protection Services with the transition.
Jason, you said there were 18?
18 PT
Oh, okay, gotcha.
with 1 in development. And we talked about it last time. We haven't really increased a lot of PT programs, but PT programs have increased the number of cohorts that they run and graduation classes. So it doesn't really factor into that number all that well. But,
Okay.
for Consumer Protection Services, while Sarah and I were kind of recruiting for and trying to fill in with the vacancy for CPS and the manager there, we're appreciative of Carol and her stepping into that management role, and also for staff who took the time to manage their own caseload and keep me on track and make sure that I wasn't the obstacle in stopping them from case review and things like that. So I thank them for that. For outreach, I just wanted to acknowledge the absence of our communication and education liaison. I know that I and staff have felt a bit of pressure to try and maintain the level of excellence when it comes to like our social media presence and the outreach and that kind of thing. And I'm sure that there's going to be some points of feedback when April returns. For the EO report itself, that is all I have. I have a couple things to talk about when we get to the report outs for reported parties like FSBPT and CPTA.
Thank you, Jason. Moving on to,
President, I'm not related to the party, but can we go back to the 2023 calendar?
oh, yes.
Under July, it says that the FSPCT live meeting is the 15th and the 16th, but on the calendar, the 22nd and 23rd are highlighted, so I just was wondering what we got.
Oh, yeah.
Let me verify that real quick. I do think it is the 15th and 16th because there is a third day that's added that I'll report on for the 17th. So 15th and 16th. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Board Member Ellaby. Any public comment on the executive officer's report? Hearing none, we're moving on to the 2018-2022 Strategic Planning Final Report. That's agenda item number 9. And Jason Kaiser and Sarah Conley.
I will take the first part, and I will say that over the last few weeks, I've been reflecting back on the process of our last 2018-22 strategic plan. And it kind of seems like it went by really fast, but there's some things I think you'll find interesting. If you think about it, since the time that we created that plan, we've seen 2 different presidents, 2 different governors, 2 different directors of the Department of Consumer Affairs. The plan has spanned over 10 different board members in the composition of the PTBC, and over 80% of PTBC staff have seen the plan from beginning to end. And we didn't know what the acronym COVID meant at the time. And we certainly couldn't have predicted all the changes that would come from learning what it meant. We learned how to work from home, we learned how to work in new ways, and we learned that we would need to be as nimble and agile as possible in the future. Most importantly, we learned that we understood our mandate at a very core level, and we were able to succeed in a very trying time. We're now well into the endemic, but the lessons we've learned during the pandemic are still fresh in our minds. That flexibility and resiliency is something that I think will show up in the creation of our new strategic plan. Looking at the close of the plan, we wanted to share our successes and our shortcomings. So to start with our first set of goals, I will do enforcement with number 1. Goal 1.1, identifying and implementing improvements to the investigation and discipline process to decrease enforcement processing times. We consider this goal to be complete. We were able to assess and update our performance measures with more reasonable timelines, as well as streamlining and modernizing those processes that I'll also cover in Goal 1.3. Goal 1.2, identify and establish additional position authority for the probation monitoring program to help ensure effective monitoring of probations. We consider this goal to be complete as well. And we were able to establish a second probation monitor position. However, that was kind of sidelined by the pandemic. We'll continue to assess the need for an additional monitor, but with a combination of less probationers and new telemeans to monitor them, we've determined that a single monitor is sufficient for now. And we reutilize that position authority for other areas in the enforcement unit. And through this presentation, if you have any questions, just feel free to interject and ask. Goal 1.3, facilitate and promote consistent, effective, and efficient communication with enforcement stakeholders to optimize the quality of services. And again, we consider this goal complete.
I have a question.
Sure.
What metrics did you use for some of these? Like, are you able to say what the metrics were?
Some have definite metrics when it comes to like the PMs and the days and being able to attain the goals. But some of them, like a probation monitor or even improving communication, I'll just give you examples of how those things were improved. Like as in an effort to go green and as a result of the pandemic, we now have better methods of communication with the Attorney General's office and the Division of Investigation. As an example, we regularly schedule monthly meetings with both organizations. And it's an opportunity for us to kind of check in, troubleshoot caseload, and make sure that everybody's on the same track, which ultimately effectively shrinks that time that it takes for each case.
I think that's very helpful, I think, for us as board members and for the public too. And I thank you for that. That's
Well,
great.
And I'd like to I think we're all kind of in similar situations when it comes to pandemic and workload and how we're able to do those things. But the Attorney General's office and the Division of Investigation have also been very cooperative in trying to keep these kind of liaison meetings going. We meet with our DAG liaison monthly to kind of review cases troubleshoot areas that he can represent us in the process. And the DFI coordinator also, just kind of keeping an eye on what are they seeing out and doing site visits and those kind of things, and making sure that we're all staying on task. In another effort to go green, and as a result of the pandemic, we're also using new tools and technology, secure web portals where we can deposit case material for AG or DFI review and also receive that material back. So that has created a more efficient process in how to transfer information back and forth, as opposed to the old way where we were boxing and shipping and waiting for things to happen. So those things, I think, are things that we wanted to do, and I think everybody has to a certain extent, but the legality involved in trying to do that without something like a global pandemic motivating the change has always created that stagnation. So, Goal 1.4, review and revise procedure manuals to reflect current business processes to enhance the quality, consistency, and sustainability of the enforcement program. Again, we consider this goal to be complete. Procedure manuals have always been kept at the board. The last goal of each section of this strategic plan spoke to procedure manuals in each and every unit. And we included this goal as kind of a self-critique. We had them, but prior to the plan, we'd gone through a lot of different transitions that essentially just made our manuals outdated. A good example of that would be transitioning to the Breeze platform, a whole new software system where we didn't take the time to revise a procedure manual. We were still developing the software itself. And so now that we're a little bit farther down the road, we've managed to keep those manuals updated and current. And again, because they were woefully outdated. Right? Now, where we're in a little bit better position, staff are actually maintaining those manuals as we streamline processes. And so from one step in the enforcement unit, from one desk to another, one analyst can pick up where another analyst left off and know exactly where or how to do a transaction. Any questions towards the enforcement side?
We've heard along the way these past few years some of these improvements implemented, and I just want to compliment the enforcement unit for all of their work and for meeting these goals.
I'd echo it, especially when it comes to things like the procedure manuals. That's a point of self-discipline. Again, to say that we're not still evolving would be an understatement. We're still making modifications to Breeze. We're still trying to find new ways to communicate and that kind of thing, and to record those into the procedure manuals and memorialize them is a task in and of itself, right? Especially now with the Office of Administrative Hearings and those kind of, you can imagine today's hearings, the procedure manual is drastically different to account for Zoom or WebEx style meetings as opposed to hearings. So licensing, I'll have Sarah represent this section of the plan.
All right, so I'm Sarah Conley. I'll be reporting on Goal 2, which is licensing. And that goal is that the board provides effective and efficient application and licensing services while maintaining consumer protection. The first objective, 2.1, is to evaluate and optimize the continuing competency program to determine and improve the effectiveness of the program. Staff began activities towards this objective, which you have seen in the continuing competency regulations being on the calendar for quite some time, as plans to address them. And then we've also tied into objective 2.2, which I'll get to in a moment, looking at the staffing. But unfortunately, in March of 2020, with the pandemic, DCA issued a waiver for continuing competency due to the pandemic, and it was in effect until March of 2022. Also, during that time, we had an applications team member that was assigned to contact tracing. And so the applications unit was down resources. For those reasons, the CC staff were redirected to the applications and licensing program. So CC activities were not happening during that time. The beginning of, July 1st of 2022, the CC staff resumed CC activities, and so we're hoping to pick up where we left off and work on some of those things, including the regulations in the coming years. So that objective is incomplete at this time. Any questions on that one? No? All right. 2.2, evaluate and establish a position authority for the continuing competency program to help ensure effective operations. This was done, the continuing competency program and the administrative services program worked together to determine what personnel is needed to successfully administer the CC program. And then we hired to fill that position. Unfortunately, they were redirected to applications. So they are, now that we have the resources, we actually have more now to pick up than when we left off. So that's exciting. So that particular objective is complete because we did get additional staffing. Objective 2.3, promote transparency and accessibility of licensing requirements and processes to improve the stakeholder experience. And we identified this as complete. We've done an evaluation of the material that's provided to applicants and licensees as far as the application process and license maintenance requests, and updated that information on the website. An example of this is a roadmap for applicants to follow on the process. And so we're trying to provide clearer information and put that, like I said, on the website, share some details through social media. But in addition to just putting that information out there, we're also doing outreach. So actually going out and explaining even further into detail what that looks like. And so that's been a big part of improving that transparency, taking away any questions, hopefully, that the applicants may have. Also sharing initial license information with the applicants, so going into licensure, they know what the expectations are. And we've also have a program, a program liaison, so that the program directors can reach out if there's any questions. They have one point of contact, and we can clarify everything more efficiently.
Sarah, I have a question. Was there any surveying of this stakeholder experience to compare a pre and post change that you might have implemented?
Yeah, we actually have continuous surveys, so we have the survey data from the beginning of the strategic plan as well as at the end. There are improvements. I don't have that for you today, but that's something that we can present at a future meeting if that's something the board would like to see. Okay. So the next objective, 2.4, analyze the program's operations and modify them if needed to provide reasonable processing times while maintaining consumer protection. We have a new application transaction in our Breeze system, which has significantly streamlined the process both for applicants as well as staff. We've evaluated the processes just to see where we can internally, cut additional time, and it's examples of that could be workload distribution. We have a staff member specifically designated to process, for example, endorsement applicants. So we separate out how they qualify for licensure, whether it be by exam for a new student or someone who's already taken the exam, already holds a license in another state, their endorsement, different pathways, so different staff are processing them, and it makes it more efficient for both types of applicants. We looked at things like how to issue PTLA, which is licensed applicant status, to allow applicants to work while they're awaiting licensure. Where can we fit that in the process to make it easier and get it out quicker while still making sure that we're maintaining consumer protection and verifying all the requirements are met. And so we've just done an internal evaluation, and I want to give a lot of credit to the applications team because a lot of the improvements are really, it puts a lot on the analysts. they are really taking a lot on themselves to making those determinations, because a lot of the work that they're able to do, it makes it easier on the applicant. So an example is if we get a document or we get an application, we don't look at it and say, oh, not here. It goes into this pile, we'll get to it when we can or when the applicant follows up. We say, okay, how can we address this the easiest, simplest way? And we'll reach out to the applicant and things like that. So it puts a lot on them and a lot of discretion, but empowers them to be able to make the process easier. Let's see. A big theme, I think, throughout the strategic plan is communication and established expectations for the applicants and licensees. As long as they know what to expect and we are consistent in what we're sharing, and then they see that when they're working with staff, it makes it easier for everyone. Breeze has helped a lot. We put everything on their online account and we communicate through email. And we're seeing all of these things not only in the survey data, but also through our performance measures. We're seeing decreased processing time. So increased satisfaction with services and decreased processing time. And that's how we're identifying that we've completed these objectives and met the goal.
Let's do a survey and publish it.
No.
I'm curious, Sarah, if I can interrupt for just a second. For 2.4, what does staff feel is the reason why this particular goal was partially met?
Because we have done a full evaluation of the processes, and I think we've identified, we have a new application, we've changed our processes to make things more efficient, and so I don't know if I'm...
But why wouldn't this pencil or thermometer, is this a thermometer?
It is a thermometer.
Why wouldn't this thermometer be full like the other lines? What part might we be missing or want to still work on to get better?
I'd have to go back and look at the activities from the objective. I'm trying to think if there was anything that I think we met all the
I think the
the
area
objectives.
that we think
Or the
that we're
activities.
deficient in is the analysis of the foreign trained. That we
Oh,
wanted.
it is incomplete. Thank
Yeah.
you. I'm sorry, I missed that part. Thank you. Yes, this one is incomplete because the foreign trained applicants did not get a full evaluation of its process. So that's something that we want to continue to work on.
So the efforts that we put into streamlining the U.S. graduates process, we want to be able to provide that same level of assessment and efficiency for foreign trained. We haven't had a chance to do that. There have been some steps that we think have improved that application process. As an example, adding coursework tool 6 to the regulatory process, or adding the performance evaluation tool from FSBPT to the evaluation process. But really kind of taking a look at the actual process and seeing if there are barriers that can be removed is the next step.
You ready for the next one? All right, the next one is 2.5, review and revise procedure manuals to reflect current business processes to enhance the quality, consistency, and sustainability of the licensing program. As we discussed, procedure manuals are so important to meet the mandate and make sure the requirements are met for best customer service. We want to have consistency and well-informed staff. And then also they provide a record so that we can periodically assess those procedures and processes with the current environment and make changes as necessary to be up to date with things, and then also documenting why things are done. I think that's really important too, not just what's being done, but hopefully the staff understand why it's being done, and again, that helps them make the best determinations on what needs to be done when they're doing their assessments and their work. But that one is complete.
Desk manuals, desk manuals, desk manuals, desk manuals. So, any questions for goal 2? So I will do goal 3, starting with objective 3.1. Identify and establish position authority and resources to enhance the relevant and timely information provided to stakeholders. We do consider this to be complete. we were able to establish a full-time permanent position as the communication and education liaison. Members might remember during the transition of this strategic plan, we created what we call a limited term position to kind of see if there was ongoing workload that would necessitate a full-time position. And we were pretty sure there was, and it turns out we were right. And so we were successful in obtaining that position authority for that sole role. Objective 3.2, develop and promote an outreach campaign for consumers of physical therapy to enhance awareness and communications for consumer protection. And this is one that we've established is incomplete. During COVID-19, we focused our communications for consumers that were pandemic related, guidance that was department-wide, things that everybody needed to know statewide, but we struggled to find meaningful outreach opportunities to consumers directly as it pertained to physical therapy services. And part of that had to do with we couldn't go out and meet face-to-face with folks. But again, we see that there's still room for improvement there, and I think it's something that we'll probably discuss into our future strategic plan. It is typically one of the hardest targets to hit. We kind of know how to reach licensees. We know how to reach educational programs. We know how to deal with students and applicants, and even work with the association. But getting to consumers directly is a little bit harder of a task. 3.3, collaborate with educational programs to improve understanding about the application process and the role of the board. And I feel a little guilty because, again, April Beauchamps is not here to represent this hard work, but we had a goal of providing continuing outreach presentations for all 30, at the time, all 32 PT and PTA programs, of which we surpassed and have now provided to 40 out of 41. And to the majority of those multiple times. So what we try to do typically is to provide 2 sessions to each cohort of a program. One session is kind of an all about the board, its composition and its mandate, laws, ethics, and then the second, a presentation of the application process. And again, 40 out of 41 is commendable, and it wouldn't have been able to do without April. So. 3.4, develop and adopt a communication and education strategy to inform all stakeholders about the regulation of the profession. Again, stealing a little bit of the thunder, almost all of our publications have been revised and rebranded in one voice. As an example, our About Us, our menu of services, our host a board meeting flyer, our newsletters, and we've revised our model guidelines for issuing citations and imposing discipline, all of which are out-facing documents for the public. 3.5, capitalize on the use of existing technologies to enhance education and communication. And again, we believe that this Biometric was completed. We've maintained our social media accounts, directing them towards consumers, licensees, applicants, and students. We've provided content via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, listserv, and we added TikTok to the mix as well. 3.6, develop a procedure manual to reflect current business processes to enhance the quality, consistency, and sustainability of the communication and education program. And this one is another manual goal, but this one sits squarely on the shoulders of April, and her manual is so detailed that even I could follow it. So when she's not here, I don't have any excuses to pick up for her work. So, any questions about goal 3? Okay. Number 4, the answers to these goals are kind of short and sweet, but they were some of our hottest fought in effort. Objective 4.1 was to relocate the board's office to an appropriately sized location to adequately support existing program operations and projected growth. I don't think that we ever anticipated we were going to be doing this during a global pandemic, but we managed to relocate to a larger space in the middle of that pandemic and do it under budget. And it seems we found the right space and just the right fit, because I think all of staff are happier that we're out of our old space. Just enough room to kind of move around and get some work done. 4.2, and this one is important to me, establish an assistant executive officer position to correct the structural imbalance faced by the board and further its mandate of consumer protection. And again, we consider this goal to be completed. We achieved a long overdue goal in establishing an AEO position for the board, which I certainly appreciate. And again, that's one of my favorites. So, 4.3, establish appropriate position authority to effectively support board programs and mandates completed. And mandates, which we consider to be completed. As we've gone through this plan, and as we presented before, we have the establishment of a probation monitor, continuing competency analyst, an outreach liaison, and an assistant executive officer, all of which we were able to do, but we also secured personnel for the applications unit and the administrative services unit. The establishment of state service positions is not an easy task. There's a lot of research and development that goes into being able to justify the existence of those positions. So the fact that over a 4-year, 5-year strategic plan, we were able to do all of those, again, is something that we're pretty proud of. 4.4, explore and establish effective methods to improve and expedite Breeze system functionality to enhance efficiency and provide better services to stakeholders. And again, we consider this goal to be completed. Sarah kind of touched on it earlier, but we've made numerous improvements to Breeze for both the applications and licensing side of things, but also the enforcement side. And that's just an ongoing project, and we'll continue to kind of tweak and fine-tune that software as we use it. There may come a date where a new product demonstrates more efficiency and more cost effectiveness, and we may find that we transition from Breeze to a new software product. But until then, we'll continue to improve Breeze as we use it. 4.5, explore and develop an effective and consistent system to improve internal communications. Again, we consider this completed. Part of this is pandemic related in the sense that we had to move to a whole new communication system. And so just the utilization of things like Outlook and Teams especially, has created an ability for us to communicate internally in a much more efficient platform. We have channels specific to all staff, channels specific to management, channels specific to enforcement, so it makes it a little bit easier for us to communicate. And again, when we wrote this plan, we didn't think we were trying to improve communication for those of us that are in the office and those of us that are working from home. So it still fit, and it worked out fairly well. 4.6, establish and improve expectations and methods of communication and engaging with external stakeholders to strengthen customer service and foster relationships while enforcing the board's mandate. We've improved our external communications by establishing more consistent and a greater frequency of communications with our external stakeholders. And we've already talked about a few with the Department of Justice and the Office of the Attorney General, DCA's Division of Investigation, but also regular and frequent check-ins with our professional association, both post and prior to board meetings, and in the process of establishing a permanent position for the legislation and regulation liaison with the board so that we can open that line of communication and keep it more consistent as well. And then lastly, for 4.7, again, procedure manuals. And we've taken those lessons learned from both applications and licensing and enforcement and applied those to creating procedure manuals for all of those tasks that we would consider either executive or administrative. And with that, I would say we're looking forward to the next round of strategic planning. And I know staff have a lot of ideas for other areas that we can improve.
Thank you, Jason and Sarah. Teamwork, rest of them.
Absolutely.
Any more comments?
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any public comment? I'd like to take a 5-minute break, just so we can stretch. We just had lunch. And that we just took in a lot of information, so.
Maybe 10 minutes. We have a presentation that we have to queue up as well.
Okay, so 10 minutes?
10 minutes, if you don't mind. Okay.
We'll take a 10-minute break. Come back at. We are reconvening. It is 2:02 p.m. and we will move forward with agenda item number 10, strategic planning final report. Strategic planning training, solid, with Shelley Jones. I will say good morning. All right, can you hear me? Do I need to do anything with this one? I can talk loud. I have a big voice. So my name is Shelley Jones, and I am the manager over Solid's planning and facilitation unit. And today with me, I have Sarah Ronnie, one of my staff. And she is actually going to be the planner assigned to handle the facilitation of your strategic planning process. So I'm going to start out, just kind of give an overview on kind of why we do strategic planning. I know some of you have been through the process before, some of you may not, but you're new. So we'll kind of go through that a little bit, and then I'm going to hand it over to Sarah, who will walk through some of the details that you'll need to know going forward. Can I ask is it possible, thank you. Is it possible that we could dim the lights a little bit? Right here. Dim it. I don't know if that helps. I'm sorry, it's not turning on. Did it help the first time? Yeah, a little bit. Sorry.
All right, so first we're going to cover the what, why, and how of strategic planning. So the what. What is a strategic plan? So strategic planning takes into account your mission, your vision, your values, and your goals, and then also stakeholder feedback. And then it documents those objectives and initiatives that are important to you as an organization. It's the process through which fundamental decisions and actions are produced that shape and guide what your organization is, what it does, and why it does it. It defines your organization's direction, outlining a path from your present towards a preferred future. Why do we do it? Well, why do we need it? So strategic planning is critical to making state government programs and operations more efficient and effective. In the 1990s, legislation was passed and enacted requiring California state agencies to develop strategic plans, measurable performance objectives, and continuous improvement processes, and that was through SB 1082 in 1993 and AB 2711 in 1994, for those who want to know. Additionally, creating strategic plans is designed to help your program achieve short-term and long-term objectives. However, for a strategic plan to work, it must contain specific goals, measurable objectives, as well as a plan for achieving them. How do we do this? So in Solid, we utilize a strategic planning roadmap. So that might be kind of small for you. And this outlines the various stages of strategic planning and the broad list of tasks that occur within those stages. When we layer on the estimated timeframes associated with each stage of the process, you can see that strategic planning takes time. This is a very important, legislatively mandated process that deserves the time and attention necessary to create your board's own roadmap that will define your direction, your path from now through the next several years.
Yeah.
If you can, for folks who might not know what SWOT
Right,
means.
so SWOT is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I just drew a blank. So those are kind of the analysis that goes into developing the plan, and when we're looking at all the responses that come back from your stakeholders, what people have identified as your program strengths, your weaknesses, and those things. That's what that analysis process is.
Thank you.
So diversity, equity, and inclusion. As you may be aware, the governor issued an executive order to strengthen the state's commitment to a California for all by directing state agencies and departments to take additional actions to embed equity analysis and considerations into its policies and practices, including our strategic planning processes. Here at DCA, we are driven by our consumer protection mission and common goal to support our employees and the people and the communities across California. As such, you will find that we have improved our strategic planning process to reflect our commitment to DEI. DEI and demographic-specific questions have been incorporated into our environmental scan surveys and into the analysis process of responses to those questions. And those will be provided in your environmental scan report that you will get in advance of your strategic planning session that Sarah will go over. You may consider developing DEI-related goals and objectives as part of your strategic plan, and you will be asked to consider the impacts of DEI on your policy decisions when you're developing your objectives. Any questions so far? No? All right, so at this time, I'm going to turn over to Sarah, who's going to break down the components of strategic plan.
Hi, very short, so trying to make sure I can see everything. So just to introduce myself, I'm Sarah Gurney. I am a strategic business analyst with Solid. I'll be your guide, I suppose we could call that, for the strategic planning process for 2023. So to talk about what the strategic planning components are. So Department of Consumer Affairs uses the Department of Finance strategic planning guidelines when we evaluate our strategic planning process. And strategic planning can kind of be broken down into 4 questions, and those 4 questions are: where are we now? Where do we want to be? How do we get there? And how do we measure progress? You can kind of think of it as kind of like a little roadmap. And so when we go with our first one, you want to analyze where are we now? This is answered by our mission, which we have yours up here right now, which is to advance and protect the interests of the people of California by the effective administration of Physical Therapy Practice Act. So your mission statement, if you need a refresher, kind of defines what the purpose of your organization and explains what it does. So when people look at your mission statement, they can clearly see this is what the board does. Your values are going to be defining how you do it, and we have them up there: commitment, consumer protection, innovation, integrity, leadership, and service. So your set of values are the guiding principles and communicate your core priorities, your mission, and how your stakeholders are treated, and kind of the desired culture about what you as a board feel most passionate about. Kind of let you look those over right now. If you would like to, during the strategic plan, we can provide an opportunity to update these if you feel that they need to be updated. And we can work with Jason on building that into the actual strategic planning process in June. So give you a little moment to look those over, kind of marinate that a little bit. Or if you have any questions.
I still like it.
Yeah? They're pretty good ones. All right. So the next question, no, we are still on where are we now? Can't ahead of myself. So the other part of where are we now is the environmental scan. And for the environmental scan, we seek feedback from both internal stakeholders, which is going to be your staff, management, and you, the board members. And we also seek feedback from our external stakeholders. These can be consumers, consumer groups, licensees, associations, or anyone else that you who can be affected or are affected by the board.
Sarah, when do you decide and how do you decide who the stakeholders are?
So I actually met twice now with Jason and Sarah and a couple of the other staff, and we talked about what groups we can include in that. Typically, when we do the survey, the survey link gets put out onto like the board's website, and then the board can also post it on their social media if they prefer, or send it out via email to the licensees, and then maybe make announcements on how to distribute it out to people. And then that survey is open for a set amount of time for people to go in and answer it. So really it's, if they're getting it by email, that's one way that people can reach it, or if they're on the board's website.
So it's open to everyone?
Yeah, pretty much.
It can be, but like in the last strategic plan, we also sent it out from the serve really to solicit licensees directly, but also to educational programs and direct emails and those kind of things. So we had the open-ended side of it, as Sarah alluded to on the website, for people to just kind of cruise across and decide whether they wanted to participate or not, but we also solicited directly through email campaign as well.
I recall perusing pages and pages of comment that some were targeted, some were more general, and some didn't seem to know that they were communicating with physical therapy.
Unfortunately, it seems to happen with a lot of boards. We'll get random comments sometimes, but hopefully we get some good ones this time.
Is there a drop-down menu for the type of stakeholder that's completing the survey?
So there's actually like a whole list that they can, how I have the survey, the draft version of it right now. There's a whole list of like saying they're a certain licensee, they're in school, or they're preparing to become a licensee. And then there's also an option, like an other option. So if nothing on the list fills their criteria, they can type it in.
Depending on the goals that we might set, would any particular unit or part of DCA be a stakeholder or is that not appropriate for this particular?
No, absolutely. So when we're identifying external stakeholders in the last round, we did request input from both DCA as an entity, the Division of Investigation, the Attorney General's office, so on. So any like she said, any stakeholder that would be affected by us.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So now moving on to our next step is where do we want to be? And this is going to be tied into your vision statement, which as a refresher for a vision statement, your vision statement is the ideal world where you have accomplished all of your goals and you have reached utopia, basically. And your vision statement is, in my opinion, still very good, which is the standard for consumer protection in physical therapy. This is another thing that you could update if you would like to. I'll give you a moment to look that over. Good? Okay. Yes. And then the other part of defining where do you want to be are your goals and objectives. And to kind of give like a quick to differentiate goals and objectives, goals are much more broad and long-term, and they clearly define each major function of the board. So these are going to be licensing, enforcement, organizational effectiveness. The objectives, however, are all the little like sub-goals that are underneath that. Those are short-term, and by short-term we mean the length of the strategic plan. And they also are outlining what needs to be done with the strategic plan. So as a quick example, let's say you have a goal area of technology. Your objective under that could be develop software application functionality to support enforcement and field investigations. So that's kind of like a little bit of how you can tell the difference between what the goal and the objective is. And then these are your goal areas. And when I met with Jason and Sarah, we had discussed about breaking out continuing competency into its own goal area for both our internal and external stakeholders to kind of talk about outside of licensing. So that's why we have it here as 5 goal areas instead of the 4 like the last strategic plan. You like that idea? Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
And does licensing include applications?
Correct. As a whole.
All right, so how do we get there? So now that we've identified where we want to be through drafting those objectives, which we'll do in the strategic plan, how do we get there? So during that, what we'll do is, so management will meet with Solid after the strategic planning process, where we're going to talk about the objectives and then determine what are the available resources and outline the action steps towards accomplishing those goals. So that's going to be assigning staff to specific steps under each objective and then determining what's our timeline for each of those steps to be completed or each of those objectives. And also providing, making sure that we have ownership over those steps. And then that's going to kind of help determine how close are we to completing these steps. And you have all your objectives all the way across the board, 100% complete at the end of the strategic plan. And then our last question is kind of also going with the action planning part of it, which is how do you measure the progress of that? How do you know that you've actually completed that objective? And one thing that you want to keep in mind when making those objectives is making sure that they are measurable so that you can indicate that you have actually completed it. So for instance, trying to think of one example, let's say you wanted to reduce your email response times by, 30%. How do you actually measure that? You could, track the amount of time that goes into when the email is received versus when it gets a response, and make sure you have tools to track and monitor that and make sure you're doing individual check-ins. That could be a specific way you would do that. And that's how that would work. Let's see. Additionally, the strategic plans usually last anywhere between 3 to 5 years. It's good to kind of have regular check-ins to kind of monitor what's the progress of the strategic plan, how it's been completed. So that's something that you will do throughout the 3 to 5 years of the strategic plan is valid. Any questions?
I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, what's the difference in terms of the value of a 3 versus a 5? How do you guys determine the recommendation that you make?
So that's up to the board. Typically, if you have a, let's say anywhere between 30 to 40 objectives, you may want to go for a 5-year plan because is it realistic that you're going to be able to complete 40 objectives within 3 years? Probably not, especially if we have something like another pandemic happen. Yeah. So it's really up to the board during that, because we'll determine how long the plan should last during that strategic planning process after we've created all of our objectives. If you only have 15, you may want to go for a 3-year one because that seems doable, that you could do 15 objectives in 3 years. But if you, like I said earlier, if you had a 30, 40 objective list, like some of our bigger boards, that might be that's probably better to do a 5-year plan. Any other questions about strategic planning? I know it's super exciting.
Any public questions?
All right. Well, pretty much the next steps are I'll be reaching out to you all, the board members, to hopefully schedule interviews in the next couple weeks to get feedback from you so that we can kind of start on the environmental scan process. So look out for an email on that in the next coming weeks. And I thank you for your time for us to present.
Thank you. So we will now move on to agenda item number 11, the Consumer and Professional Associations and Intergovernmental Relations Reports.
My only recommendation would be to take these a little bit out of order and do DCA and then the association first, and then I'll follow up this one.
Okay, so if we could have ECA, that's agenda item 11B.
All right, thank you all for the opportunity to present to you today. Our BBR staff, Board and Bureau Relations staff, are currently participating in board member orientation training today, so I'll be providing the update on their behalf. First, as we talked about and mentioned in the strategic planning presentation, DCA is in the middle of implementing DEI throughout the department, and there is a steering committee that was assembled for that. At the end of January, they met, and they decided to focus on training in the first quarter of 2023. So over the next few months, it's already started to happen, but will continue. All staff, including all of my staff in Solid and Board and Bureau leadership, will have received DEI training, and then there'll be regular reoccurring training opportunities provided going forward. On March 3rd, our planning and training unit, or training unit, I should say, led a full day of training for the DEI steering committee, and that training included 4 modules: understanding the value of DEI in the workplace, learning to navigate diverse conversations, decoding our unconscious biases, and unleashing the power of generalization differences. And then yesterday, as part of the Director's Quarterly, the executive officers and bureau chiefs attended a 1.5-hour DEI leadership training to gain a general understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what it means to be a leader and a regulator within DCA. Then in late April, the Solid trainers will be DEI certified, and they will offer DEI-related trainings to all DCA employees by June. And then the DEI committee is scheduled to meet again on May 12th. And as we just talked about strat planning, our Solid team, we have updated our strategic planning processes, which includes an equity analysis to tie in with the DEI, environmental scan surveys, and the SWOT analysis, as we identified, now include DEI-related questions to assist boards and bureaus in developing DEI-related goals and objectives as part of their strategic plans. To further assist the boards and bureaus, sample DEI objectives will be provided to help you get an idea of how to build those into your objectives. And then a training video, as well as video messages from our agency secretary and our DCA director are in the works that will explain their perspectives on DEI and how it relates to the board's roles as regulators and policymakers. And those will be shown at the beginning of your strat plan session. To improve public access, DCA created, and we just launched within the last day or so, a centralized page on DCA's website. And there, in that web page, we will house all of DCA's Board and Bureau strategic plans and provide links to the environmental scan surveys and information for public participation at your strategic planning sessions. We've been working with the boards and bureaus to develop the new strategic plans,
and we will continue working to update existing strategic plans to embed those DEI components. For board member training, just some reminders. Now is a great time to review all of your required board member trainings and submit your certificates of completion to your executive officer and DCA at the member relations email. There are 2 DCA-wide mandatory trainings for 2023. This includes sexual harassment prevention training and information security awareness. All DCA employees and appointees, including you board members, will need to complete the sexual harassment prevention training this year, and the training is required every odd-numbered year. It is offered online, it's self-paced, and it does take approximately 2 hours. In addition, if you're assigned to a DCA email, I don't know if you all have them, okay. You are required to complete the Information Security Awareness Fundamentals 2023 training. That training will address everyone's role in protecting DCA data and information. That training is also online and is required every year. Both the sexual harassment prevention training and the information security awareness training are available on our department's learning management system, the LMS. Both trainings can be accessed online at any time, so you can take them at your leisure. And in the next few weeks, board members will receive information on how to access these trainings if you've not already done so. Also as a reminder, board members must complete board member orientation training, or also known as BMOT, within the first year of appointment or reappointment, ethics training within 6 months of appointment and every 2 years thereafter, and defensive driver training within the first year and every 4 years thereafter. For your convenience, these trainings are offered multiple times a year in a variety of formats. For more information on mandated trainings, a page has been created to help members identify, access, and track specified trainings. The page includes direct links to mandatory trainings, as well as pertinent information and policies specific to these training courses. You can find that on the DCA website. If you click on the DCA Board Member Resource Center, the information should be contained there under Required Board Member Training. And you can also reach out to your BBR staff, Melissa Gear or Yvonne Durantis, if you have any questions or need assistance. Looking ahead, for board member orientation training, currently there's one going on today, as I mentioned. Our next ones will be June 20th and October 10th. You can register for those trainings through the LMS. And with regard to our board meetings, our virtual meetings and Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, legislation, as you know, passed last year that amended provisions of the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act to extend the ability of state bodies, such as DCA's boards and bureaus, to conduct public meetings virtually, and that takes us up to July 1st, 2023. Under the current provisions, no physical meeting location is necessary. Board members' virtual locations do not need to be open to the public, and members of the public can participate virtually or telephonically, which increases accessibility to our meetings. Recently, SB 544 was amended to include Bagley-Keene provisions, and I'm sure there'll be more information coming forth with that as that bill and the language is reviewed. Absent successful passage of new legislation, DCA's boards and bureaus will not be allowed to conduct meetings virtually. After July 1st, we will have to return to the telephonic teleconference meeting style that we used to do and the requirements that you were accustomed to before COVID-19. So I'm sure there'll be more to come on that bill. The BBR Winter Newsletter, in case you missed it, circulated at the end of January. The issue includes an introduction of our board and bureau relations team, helpful resources, training details, and department updates. You can visit the DCA website to view that. Our enlightened enforcement process has begun again. You may remember that last year this project team released its report, including recommendations on how to improve licensing processes, specifically for the Board of Registered Nursing, but there were many recommendations that other boards could implement as well to improve their processes. Starting in March, the team is now moving forward to enforcement, and the Dental Board of California has agreed to be the first board to go through this process. On March 2nd, the co-chairs on this project led staff through a review of their complaint and investigation process
as subject matter experts from all boards were able to ask questions and provide suggestions. This review process will continue until all aspects of the enforcement process have been reviewed. The end result will be another report with recommendations, a sample enforcement policies and procedures manual, and a critical review of the process that would be used to update DCA's Enforcement Academy training. This process will also assist in identifying the codes used for reporting to ensure all boards and bureaus are reporting their data accurately. And that's it. Our Board and Bureau Relations team does look forward to working and assisting you throughout this year. They are here to support you in the important work you do. So please don't hesitate to reach out to Melissa or Yvonne when needed. And thank you again. Are there any questions?
Any public comment, questions? None? Then we can move on to agenda item 11C, California Physical Therapy Association. If you can join us at the mic.
Good afternoon, board members. Thank you for allowing us to speak today. Tamika Island with the CPTA Executive Associate of Professional Affairs. Just a couple of updates today for you. The first is a friendly reminder that CPTA will be hosting its annual conference this year in Long Beach, California. We extend the invitation to have the board exhibit with us, complimentary, so we'd love to have you represented there, and are trusting that our attendees will be excited to have the opportunity to interact with you and see you represented. And the second update is regarding a project, a legislative project that CPTA has embarked upon. 2 years ago, the CPTA created a task force to look at the modernization of the PT scope here in California. That task force, that work group completed its charge 2 months ago and has developed proposed legislative language looking at a number of interventions and areas of practice. We would like the opportunity to share that language with the board if appropriate, to get your feedback if any is generated from that. Our legislative timeline is anticipated we would introduce a bill, legislation, either in early 2024 or 2025, should we successfully secure an author for that legislation. But it's coming down the pipeline. Last year, we held an open forum at our annual conference looking for feedback from licensees and other stakeholders. We obtained a lot of viable feedback from that, and we anticipate we will have a couple of additional opportunities to share that language with our internal committees along with the public. So you will likely be hearing that. If any of you are members of the CPTA, you'll also have an opportunity as a member to see that language once we're ready to share it within the next couple of months. Wanted to give you a heads up on that and encourage you to provide feedback once you have an opportunity to review the language. Any questions for me?
Thank you. I do have one question. Last meeting, there was an update regarding credentialing for PTs and OTs in the school district. Is there any update on that item?
Yes, thank you for the question. There was a bill introduced, AB 381, which you will have an opportunity to look at, possibly discuss tomorrow on your agenda. That bill specifically creates an opportunity for physical therapists and occupational therapists to no longer be prohibited from obtaining a healthcare service credential. So right now, the current statute reads that physical therapists and occupational therapists are prohibited from obtaining a healthcare service credential. AB 381 strikes that language, allowing that first step in PTs and OTs obtaining what we call a base credential, an entry-level credential, and then advanced certification and education would allow the second step of that, which would be to secure your healthcare service credential for those in the school-based setting. So that is currently in play. It's an active bill. It is scheduled for legislative hearing next Wednesday, March 29th, 1:30 p.m.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any public comment? Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Moving on to agenda item 11A. So we have someone from FS.
I'll be reporting out for the FSBT portion. There's a few things to report. One is, last month I attended the first in-person meeting of the Sexual Misconduct Committee for the FSBT. The charge is to establish best practices as it pertains to practitioners and what consumers can also respect in certain situations. We were charged with providing resources for students, existing practitioners, and even consumers, and we'll be bringing some of those materials to the Leadership Issues Forum in July. In addition to the Leadership Issues Forum in July, they've added a third day, and FSBPT has invited us to their Model Practice Act workshop on the 17th. And this invitation is collaborative in nature. We'll be joined by representatives from the CPTA to take a look at FSBPT's 7th edition of the Model Practice Act, see how it varies from our own and how it might be leveraged to meet our jurisdictional needs. And again, we look forward to joining the CPTA in that venture as well. That's all I have for FSBPT. The only thing that I would add is for the CPTA report is that we're scheduled to provide a webinar Wednesday on April 12th that will cover ethics, laws, and regulations, as well as a Q&A portion. And this will be similar to the webinar that we did in September of 21 for continuing competency regulations and the Q&A.
Could you repeat that date, Jason?
April 12th.
Thank you.
Can you tell us where the July 17th Practice Act?
It'll be in, I think it's Arlington, Virginia, and it will be with the Leadership Issues Forum at the same time. For that particular meeting, myself and the board chair are invited, or the delegate. And since we're going to be at the Leadership Issues Forum at the same time, typically we go with the administrator of the program and the delegate.
Any board comment? Any public comment? Thank you, Jason. Moving on to agenda item number 12, communication and education update. Back to Mr. Kaiser.
I am just going to represent the report that was prepared by April before she left on maternity, so I'm prepared to answer any questions that you might have. We're on the same track that we normally are. You'll see and hear she's very critical of her Facebook performance as usual, but our other measures are still excellent. Once April returns, I know that we have some projects on deck to perform when it comes to video tutorials for the application process and a couple other transactions as it pertains to licensees. So some video content finally.
It's exciting.
And so any questions that you might have about outreach?
I have a question, Jason. Do we post anything about like our associations, events, and things like that, so that students and licensees are aware of opportunities for engagement?
We have in the past, but we'll be posting that April 12th webinar as an opportunity because of the collaboration. But other than that, there have been social media tweets that I think CPTA and I have agreed that we'll share theirs and they'll share ours. But nothing that we've done in like a collaborative nature at this point.
This is a
question, Jason. And I briefly had a short conversation with you about this. In our communication and education, because I'm noticing now that there is more sign language opportunities to reach that audience. Is there any thought about including that? And I'm saying that because when you see a lot of the entertainment, the social media,
So
things that language is there as well.
as it pertains to accessibility issues, one of the things that you'll find with even the webcast that we're doing today, that it is closed captioned for that portion. But to assign language interpreter would be a whole different venue, so that's something that we'll have to look into.
Thank you.
Any news on our new website? I always ask, sorry, I'm just.
No, and I appreciate that, because it applies a little bit of pressure. We have been notified that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that we're supposed to have steps accomplished by July 1, I think is what's been the commitment from DCA's OAS for us and the web team for us. A lot of work has been done when it comes to the tabs and the design. And so at the June meeting, that's definitely something, if it's not already published, that we can provide like a kind of a visual capture of what the draft's going to look like. Because the staff and I have had the pleasure of working on that and looking at what the new website will look like, but it is a little frustrating to not have it up and running already.
Sorry, so you said the word commitment.
Yes.
So there's a commitment that the draft will be prepared by July?
That we will have a new working template and new redesign of the website itself by July.
Will there be opportunity for stakeholder feedback?
So there are built-in survey links in different sections of the website for topical in nature, and one of them will be kind of an overall customer service kind of base survey where they'll be able to provide feedback for that. We will always take that feedback anyway, and if there are good ideas, we will try to implement them. And that's part of what's in the draft that we would like to present, is there are some new kind of concept ideas when it comes to real-time information that might be able to be shared on the website. Statistics, expectations for application timelines, those kind of things.
Do you have a model with which you're trying to think about drafting this after?
So there are what we would call typical website templates that are designated for state service, and we have a few to choose from. They're all very similar in nature. The outlines are a little bit different from one to the other. Boards typically choose one of two. And for the Department of Consumer Affairs, I would say that about 60 to 70% of us have transitioned to the more modern templates. So we're kind of just next in line.
Looking forward to it.
Any comments? Any public comments? Okay, so then we will move on to agenda item 13, public comment on items not on the agenda. And I would like to note that the board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section that is not included on the agenda, except to decide whether to place that matter on the agenda for a future meeting. Hearing none. Well, I think we have had a very productive day for day one of our two-day board meeting, and so I am going to recess the meeting. We will meet again tomorrow morning, call to order at 9 a.m. We are ending this meeting at 2:46 p.m. Everyone be safe, it's raining, and we'll see you all tomorrow.